We are live and talking racing.
Again.
Again.
Yeah, I am ruining this show with all the racing talk.
Raceway Park. Man, I used to hear that every springtime. I don't know where Raceway Park is. It must be somewhere near New York City because it was the New York City radio stations that had the commercials. I don't know what kind of racing went on. There must have been funny cars because I remember them saying funny cars too.
Would that be a drag strip then?
I don't know.
Because funny cars are one of the top divisions in drag racing.
That's right, they are. Must be a drag strip.
Mm-hmm. You do have is Millville, New Jersey, close to New York?
I have no idea.
Because they have a big racetrack there, but it's for road racing.
Millville, I have not heard of it, so I don't know. But only northern New Jersey is close to New York City.
Yeah, the Meadowlands.
Southern New Jersey, you get close to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. Philadelphia has some pretty good, decent tracks. Pocono.
The Pocono Speedway.
Pocono's Raceway. It's the Pocono Raceway. It has a 2.5 mile oval and a road circuit inside. But it's not considered too dangerous for IndyCar.
Dangerous tracks. That's what get everybody excited. And our big comic book news this week is Ike Perlmutter has been fired from Disney.
Yes.
Woohoo! Bye, Ike.
You know, they kind of use all the layoffs to justify it.
Yep. Good.
Because his position is now redundant.
Englishtown, New Jersey. Funny cars. There we go. That's probably where Raceway Park is. Yeah, they used some. I know they've been wanting to get rid of him for ages. I don't know why they didn't. Probably because he had something in his contract when Disney bought Marvel for him, I imagine.
Well, as one of the major shareholders, he could have a place on the board. Right. The thing, from what I've read, he tried a board takeover a few months back.
Right.
And Bob Iger convinced the other members of the board that it was time to oust Ike. Because they also didn't like that Ike was trying to take over the board.
Yeah, that probably didn't make them happy, the board members who were there. But
Ike would never write a book, How to Make Friends.
No. How to Buy Friends. You'd write that book.
Mm-hmm. Wilson, did you bring the cake?
No. I did not have time to go get cake. I was actually having a little problem on my computer, so that's why I'm on my phone, and I'm trying to get it to restart. But at the time I hit it to restart, it was in the middle of downloading, I guess, a new copy of something.
Okay.
Of one of the Adobe products, and it's like, okay, why is it still taking this long? So I do not know what my computer is currently doing.
Well, your phone sounds pretty good. You're not getting any squeals or feedback on it.
Okay, great. And I'm also using it on
better lighting too.
Really? It's actually worse lighting because I got the natural light coming in. I got a lamp behind me, and I got a smaller lamp to the side. But yeah, if it's working, it's working.
It's working.
The only problem is you guys are so tiny.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a cookie, so I will eat it later.
Yeah, there we go.
Excellent.
Hello.
I also have whiskey, so can.
I should get out one of my Marville pint glasses that Bill Gemmis had made just to drink out of at the end of the IPA.
Right now, I can't afford the good stuff, so I am reduced to drinking J&B, which is slightly better than Vet 69 nowadays.
But I heard Marvel, like the Marvel Comics, is being restructured into some other part of Disney. Wonder how that's going to affect them.
Yeah, probably a few people are going to get fired.
That always happens with restructuring, no doubt about that.
Right, because I think on one of the articles I saw, but didn't read it because I only look at the top of the articles. I didn't realize that the article that mentioned Ike being fired also mentioned a couple of number of employees going too. But I believe that's Disney across the board.
Right,
not
right.
just
Disney's laying off like 10% of its workforce or something crazy.
Yeah, over 7,000 people.
Wow. That's rough.
Yeah, I could say, well, I feel bad for people getting fired, but it's like I've been through 2 of those with Marvel alone, so I know what that's like. Unfortunately.
And when you go through one of those as a freelancer, they just don't call you. Like when I was working I used to work for this company called Grass Valley. I was a freelancer doing, graphic design stuff for them. And they got bought up by a bigger company. And, I still kept doing my work for them, but the people who gave me the work slowly got let go. And then one day the work just stopped. No one tells you. When you're a freelancer, no one tells you that there'll be no more work coming in. They just don't care. And all of a sudden, emails and you're like, hey, I haven't seen work in a while. Oh, yeah. We're not sending you any anymore. Oh, thanks for telling me.
Or even worse. We couldn't tell you because I got laid off.
Right.
So now you no longer have an entry to that company.
Right.
That happened to quite a few of my freelancer friends where during the during the early layoffs of, I don't know which one, if it was Marvolution or one of the various layoffs Marvel had, he lost all his editors in one shot.
Oh, yeah.
And he was not, and that was the only contacts he had because he had only just started. So he had all his editors in one basket, so to speak, and they were all gone in one shot. And that was it.
As Gil Kane said, you don't work for companies, you work for editors.
That is very true. I used to joke around as you have to collect editors. No matter where you go, you get their business cards. You collect them like Pokemon because you never know. And if you get a good editor, he'll bring you to the other companies he goes to. And I've had a number of them do that. Every company, there's one editor that every company he went to, he always tried to get me something there as long as he was still being able to order art freelancers. So that's how I went from doing comics, from coloring comics to lettering comics and to doing sketch cards, is because I had followed an editor who went through all that and then back to manga. So again, it's like be friendly with your editors and always keep in touch with them.
Yeah. And like with Bad Idea, sometimes the editors leave and I don't know. All of a sudden I'm removing their credits and I'm like, what happened? Like Warren Simmons. He left like last year.
Yeah, you don't get a warning at all.
And he actually sent me an email. Hey, Jared, can I give you a call a little later on? I was like, sure. Then I never heard from him. And he was going to call me to tell me he was leaving, but he didn't get a chance. Then like 6 months later, I was like, whatever happened to Warren? And now I'm not sure, but I think Carl Bowlers may have left Bad Idea.
Oh, yeah?
Who I've been working with for years. Yeah, because all of a sudden I'm removing his name from the credit, but no one's told me he's left or not, so I'm not really sure. Hey, I know he was feeling a little burnt out, so was Warren. That's why he left. But I'm like, I wonder if he's still... I don't know. Haven't heard from him. And the reason I might not have heard from him is because he's not there anymore.
Mm-hmm. But even if you're working in the office, that's what happened with Bob Harris. He was just gone one day. He was there, and he was gone.
That's how Ike liked to do things. That's why I wonder if they did that to Ike. Ike liked to, around Christmas time, fire people at lunchtime and have them escorted out of the building. So you'd come back from the lunch. I remember Johnny Green that happened to. We're like, we're like, where's Johnny? Like, oh, he got fired. He got let go. I'm like, what? At lunch, he was just gone.
You got
you
more
come back from
information than
lunch
I ever
and you
did.
don't realize till like later on in the afternoon that people have been fired at lunchtime.
Mhm.
That was Ike's method of firing people, and he liked to fire people every year around Christmas time. So that's why if Ike fell down some stairs, I wouldn't mind. You know, I mean, I don't wish ill on most people, but him I can wish a little ill on. I'm glad he got fired. I hope they did it at lunchtime.
I worry about the stairs.
What was that?
I would worry about the stairs. How are the stairs doing?
You're right. We're gonna have to fix those stairs.
But there's just something just in the title where it was like when they got rid of him, just in the title was the frosting on my cake, so to speak, that he's part of this whole thing of having the downside altogether anyway, and he's part of that. Just makes it I hate that people got fired. Right. I don't care. Like that could have been just about him alone, and I would have enjoyed it even more. That if Disney decided, hey, but it's
we're finally getting rid of this guy.
Yes, I don't know if it's going to be any better or worse for Marvel.
Yeah,
but
no
clue. And again, it's like, how sorry can you be for a millionaire anyhow?
A billionaire,
billionaire who came in the way he did, and I have no love for him. That's for sure.
He's a self-made man. He had to borrow his first $1 million from his wife's uncle. I just love that. That's in the book, Comic Wars. He's a self-made man. He had to borrow his first $1 million from his wife's uncle. Imagine that, self-made, and he thinks that's what makes him. I have to look up that quote. I haven't seen it in a while. Just because I need that quote.
My computer's restarting. Right. But yeah, I mean, I personally only had a handful of dealings with him. And I may have mentioned it in the show. Right after we moved from 387 to, I think it's 40th Street was the address, I had gotten a bigger office because they had merged together the art returns office with the library. So they gave me a larger size office. And at Marvel, for those who don't know, you don't really get promotions. You'll be asked, hey, can you handle this for us as well? And so that's how it was art returns. And then I became the librarian as well. And then I also started doing the comps because they fired everybody. They fired more than enough people in the mailroom that they didn't have anyone to handle the comps. So it was like, hey, Wilson, would you mind doing the comps? So that's how I ended up doing the comps. And for those who don't know, the comps were basically the free comic books that we would get delivered to be handed out to the employees that was working mostly in the bullpen and only editorial. Mm-hmm.
Let's tell them what Ike did with the comps. Before Ike, Marvel and DC had a reciprocal deal where everybody at DC got Marvel books and everybody at Marvel got DC books. So there were comps everywhere. There was, comics everywhere at Marvel. When Ike got handed ownership of Marvel by the judge, the first thing he did, he saw all the comic books around the office and didn't like that. Because to him, those were comic books. That was him losing money, the fact that there were comic books around the office. So the first thing that happened was he stopped the comps. He said, no more free comics for anybody in the office. Which made, of course, DC, for a little while, we only got comps of DC. But then DC said, whoa, Marvel's not giving us any books. We're not giving them any books. So then he actually wanted the editors to clean all the comic books out of their office. And what he would do was he would walk around the office at night after it closed. And if he saw comic books, he would take them and sell them. And he would actually steal stuff from people's desk and sell it on eBay because he considered everything in the office was his. That's how insane he was. So we were told. So then eventually they talked some sense into him and they got some of the comps. First it was only editors got comps. And then it was like other people who worked there got comps, but they didn't get DC comps. And they could either have because it used to be you got anything Marvel published, you got. Anything DC published, you got. But then it was you could choose either trade paperbacks or monthly comics. Those were the one you have one or the other, but not both. And you had to take them home right away, or Ike was going to stop giving them to you. That's how insane he was. Now, like I said, I never actually had any personal dealings with him. I just had to deal with all this crap that he. So when Wilson says he had to do the comps just for editorial, because editorial were the only ones who got the DC comps as well as the Marvel comps. Like the rest of the building got either trade paperbacks or and me as a freelancer at that point, they wouldn't give me anything. And there used to be, like I said, comics all over the place where any comic you wanted, you could probably go and get because it was a comic book company. Of course, there's supposed to be comics all over the place, but not with Ike around. He was a nut.
He was a nut. His rationale was, well, car companies don't give away cars. And it's like, yeah, but I'm pretty sure if you work for the car company, you're probably not paying full retail price if you wanted it. I don't know. I don't know anything about cars, to be honest with you. But this is what I did know about.
Don't give away cars, but they have cars in stock specifically for everybody else to drive, including the competition.
Okay. So with the comps, the way it was explained to me is Marvel will put in an order for, let's say, 3,000 Amazing Spider-Man books. The printer will print more than the 3,000. It was always an overprint because of damage or whatever. So Marvel, with those overprints, is what became our comps. That they were these extra books. So Marvel already paid for them in a way, but they were not meant to be sold. That wasn't going to be extra money for Marvel. They're not printing exactly 3,000. It might be 3,300 or whatever it could be, whatever a printer's overprint is going to be.
Right.
Because again, things could get damaged in the printing process. So there was always a few more books printed. So it wasn't costing him any more, any less money. It was just his insanity that was part of it. The other thing that disappeared before the comps were couches.
Oh.
that couldn't stay in the office. The reason why you can't have a couch, you were going to say?
I didn't even realize at the time, but he banned freelancers from coming to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Like freelance artists and freelance writers technically weren't allowed in the office anymore, which is why there was no receptionist.
Yeah. Because again, it was one of those things. So the reason why couches was tossed out, you couldn't have a couch in your office, is because he believed people had sex on couches. That's it. That was the reason. He didn't want any couches in the offices. But it's like if you're visiting the office and you're coming, you go to see your editor, you had to sit somewhere, you sat on the couch. That's why the couches were there. It was just all this weirdness of him running around and, the whole thing with taking paper clips and staples out of the trash bins. That was a story going around for a while too, that he, again, at night, he went around the offices and it's like, why was this thrown away with the paper clip still attached? He nickeled and dimed everything in that place.
Mm-hmm. If you didn't have a receptionist, how would someone come to the offices like an advertising client to have a meeting with him?
I don't know.
Oh no, his floor had a receptionist. Okay. Everyone else, because there were certain floors that you had to go to get into Marvel. So by the time we moved to the newer place, there was like one main receptionist.
Oh, and no, then at 40th Street, there was no receptionist.
There wasn't any at all?
I don't think so. By that time, there was no receptionist.
I thought the 387
there was a receptionist, and then it was empty.
Right, but 387 had a receptionist on 10, 11, and 12.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that one on every floor. But the one at 10 disappeared.
Right, the 110 disappeared. Editorial disappeared. So basically, if you were going to editorial, you had to contact them first. And then
I know there was no receptionist at 40th and at the other, what would they go, the Fifth Avenue one, because I was a freelancer, technically. I had no security card. So someone had to let me in the building. And there was no receptionist to let me in the building. I had to wait for someone to come by and let me in the building.
Right. So from what I remember, on 40th Street, there was a receptionist on the 9th floor. That was the official place you can go to either make do deliveries or someone to come and visit. Because I remember having to get people from the 9th floor receptionist at the time. And then I only visit Marvel once on the 5th Avenue one.
Okay.
And that, I don't remember what floor I had to go to, but there was a particular floor I got to go to at a certain time, and I guess that's when they let people in. But again, it's like, it did get to the point that if you were visiting an editor as a freelancer, you went and visit that editor. Old Marvel, you would come in and you could wander around and talk to other editors and pick up jobs and stuff like that. But they stopped that entirely.
On 40th Street, you couldn't visit your editor. I know that because it led to an incident with Corey Pettit in a writer. Word came down at one. This is one time they were on 40th Street for what, 2 years, from like 2002 to like 2004 or something like that. I can't even remember.
Definitely 2004, because that's when I was let go in 2004. I think they were there for about another year or so.
Right, but anyway, what happened was, what happened was the freelancers couldn't get in the building because there was no receptionist. So someone would either have to let them in or they'd walk in behind someone. So word came down from Ike. That's what we were told. That we were told that you are not to let anyone in the building who doesn't work here. If you do, you will be fired. Which led to an incident with, I forget which writer it was, coming into the building like he always did, and he was coming in with Corey Pettit, and Corey was like, "Oh, I don't know you. I don't think I can let you in." And he was like, "What? You don't know me? You don't know who I am? I'm so and so." And the old writer going on, and it was just, but that was a whole incident one after, because word came down from Ike: if you let anyone in the building, you'd be fired. Which that's always Ike's threat. His threat was always, if you do this, you'll be fired. There was no other threat from Ike except you'll be fired. And that's what our bosses always told us, Or sometimes they threaten to fire Dan. If you don't do this, we're going to fire Dan. Who's our boss? We're going to fire your boss.
I never heard that. I never heard that.
I heard that more than once. Because they knew we didn't care if we got fired.
Yeah.
We were screwed. They didn't treat us well anyway. Firing a bullpenner was like a blessing.
I do have to say, when I did get let go, I was happy, because by that time I was miserable. So I did not expect to go when I did. I thought maybe I had another couple of years left in me. So it was more like, well, I'm going. In my hubris, I thought I'll go right to DC. It just didn't happen.
Scott has had sex on couches. That's good to know. Oh, yeah, it was in 40th, 2004, then 5th Avenue building for a short time in 2005. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And good evening, Lord Tatman. But yeah, that's what. Listen, I don't even know. I never had any dealings with Ike in person. It was just all his policies trickled down. So had to deal with all this crazy.
I only ever had to deal with him as I don't know why he had to come to my office. He was walking around with Bob Greenberger at the time, who was my boss, and I don't know who else. And they came into my office, and he started to freak out. But I couldn't ask any questions. I was just there. And when I went to open my mouth to say something, Bob just kind of gave me a signal. So I just kept quiet. And so he's there with his hands up on his head, seeing this place. And he's like, we just moved in here. Not everything is put away. I don't know if he just saw all the comic books, all the art, or he just did not know what my room entailed. Other than it was taking up all this space. And it was like, well, this is the artwork that goes back, and the books are for the library. They have to be bounded together for the library. But I guess, I don't know why he was taking this tour. I don't know if he went through the rest of the bullpen, if he went through the rest of the 9th floor, rest of the 10th floor at the time, but I never found, because at one point I told Bob, what the hell was that about? And I said, oh, don't worry about it. And so, okay. Fine, and this is still years before I got fired, so I don't think that was the catalyst that started. But every now and then we would get weird questions will pop up. And one point it's like we had someone visit and go, what is this room for? And this is when we were at 387. Like, well, this is the art return stuff. And he goes, how much value is in this room? And it's like, I don't know the number. I couldn't tell you. I think later I found out it was an insurance thing, because it's like, how much does this art cost to Marvel? And it's like,
I think he'd want to sell it. That's why.
Probably. But I think it was because the things that were asked of me is like, well, what is this worth to Marvel? It's like, well, we give these back to the freelancers. Technically, they were only worth something until the book got printed. Once the book is printed, they don't need the artwork anymore. That's why it goes back to the artist.
Right.
So I guess they were trying to basically insure the contents of the building at some point,
right?
Or the offices. What is this worth? If it went up in flames or something, I don't know. I have no idea. All I know is like, how much is this room worth? I have no idea. I can't put prices on this stuff.
What am I, an art appraiser?
Back then, all I knew was like, you could probably buy that for $50 or maybe $100 for that one. I don't know. Any given time, you just don't know what artwork is in there.
Yeah.
And I was only talking about the current artwork. I wasn't going to bring up the Silver Age stuff that was in there that eventually went back to some of those artists. But it was like, I'm not sure how to answer I'm not sure how to answer any of your questions because I don't know what this is leading to. So every
couch sex, free comics, and all the garbage paper clips you can eat. Sounds like the perfect job.
Exactly. But you could always tell when a corporation is really nickel and diming you. Is that I remember the day the toilet paper changed in the bathroom. We went to having really good toilet paper to sandpaper. And that switch was almost overnight. We used to get free soda and coffee, and that switched overnight. Things like that was really quick to change once he showed up.
I wish I could have been there when Ike came down to check out his nemesis Julio. Did you ever hear that story? Julio told me this one. Julio was a guy who worked with us in the bullpen. And first of all, you have to understand that Ike, all that sample stuff that Marvel get, all that not for resale stuff, Ike was selling either on eBay or through his flea market connections. So all that stuff was money to him. And he'd also sell it to us, the employees. So the stuff that they used to give us, as comps or whatever, now Ike would sell it to you. So a few enterprising people were buying these high-end statues, like the Bowen stuff, like the artist proofs and the not-for-resale stuff, and they were putting it on eBay. They were buying it from the Marvel store and putting it on eBay before it was even for sale through Bowen. So, of course, they were like, what the hell? You can't be doing this. So then Ike got mad at everyone for doing this, but he wasn't going to stop selling it to them because he was making money from selling it to the employees. And everybody was like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? Julio went, I don't care. Julio went, he's doing the same exact thing. He's selling on eBay. Want me to tell you his eBay store? Is it because we all knew the guy who was running his eBay store? It's Boondog Collectibles. He's selling him. If he wants to get me in trouble, I'm going to get him in trouble. So of course Ike hears this and he comes downstairs and Julio just doesn't care. And Ike's come down here. He's like, he's like, you're Julio. It's like, yeah. I just wanted to check out who you were. And Julio's like, all right. And then they came up with
beautiful.
Julio just didn't care. Julio's like, you take me down, I take you down with me. So they came up with a thing where they could still buy it, but they had to wait a month to sell it on eBay. That was the compromise in the end. All because Julio wasn't bending. He was like, hey, you can do this, I can do this.
That is wonderful. Oh,
that was like, all right, I see that logic.
I love that. I'm going to switch it over to the computer.
Okay.
Actually, I could probably switch it over while I'm still on this, because that the phone isn't fully charged. So
let's see the switch over.
Let's see if this works.
But that's why we're all giggling that I got fired from Disney. It was nice to see. Will the switchover happen? We're all waiting. Oh, there we go. Let me remove that one and add that one.
All right.
There he is. Are we big now? Oh, Darren's here too. Good evening, Darren.
Good to see you guys. I don't know if I could help myself from chiming in on the topic
now
at
your
hand.
sound is messed up again, Wilson.
Is it? Oh.
I don't know.
There's something wrong with your computer. Oh, now we're getting huge echo.
I think he's playing the show at the same time.
Ooh. I added your phone back in because holy cow, it just started screeching.
It was probably feedback. I don't know if you guys covered this because this is 2004, but I heard some of it. The one that sticks out to me, and there's more for sure, is when Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2 with Dr. Octopus came out on DVD, right? So we got a company-wide email that from HR, probably person who who I'm probably talking about. And basically, I kind of remember the email. It said like, "It's here, it's on DVD, and here's your opportunity to own it." And so basically, a price was given. It wasn't a terrible price. I think it was probably less than retail for sure. But like, you swing by and buy your copy. But this is the thing is, that Sony probably sent cases over to the Marvel office. Thank you very much for your help. Congratulations on the success of the movie.
Right.
This is for your staff.
This is all not for resale stuff.
That's right. It was just, but we had the opportunity to buy it. And on principle, I said, I would rather pay more at like Best Buy or something than to buy it here.
Because all that money went right into Ike's pocket.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was, the stories are legendary. You'll see some like how you McDonald on the Beat has a bunch of stuff that maybe, could be 1 degree of separation, maybe a little skewed, but the one, and this was not terrible. At least it wasn't money. So there was, we got company-wide email. I remember this, to our signature lines in our emails to decrease the font size to 6 or something, because I think someone printed something and it spilled over to a second page because of the signature in the email. Now, how often is that going to happen? Not much, but that. So basically, less.
He probably printed out his emails.
Smaller font size, less ink, less paper. Okay,
less paper.
Okay,
fewer paper clips.
But yeah, the Marvel store thing really rubbed me the wrong way for obvious reasons you just said, and For those of us who were there twice or the whole time, you too were. When I say the whole time twice, what I mean is from like the old regime through the whole bankruptcy. So I was there twice, 10 years apart, before and after. Okay, once as an intern, once on staff. when I was coming back, I was told by some other people who came back, like, just know you're coming back to a very different company.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the process. And day one, when I got back there in 2004, I basically was told, here's who to look out for.
Right.
In terms of like the spies.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay.
Guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. And that's probably true for a lot of companies, but like I was about to say exceedingly nice with people, but I didn't want to be like saccharine sweet over the top, like, like where it was obvious what I was doing. It wasn't a kiss ass thing. It was just basically the walk on eggshells thing. Right. But like, I remember the names of who they were, at least the two I knew. One of them who was kind of a rat, he got let go anyway for something else. So, so interesting week. And as you guys, I mean, I'm sure you guys have read, like, also, I'm not sure what you said at the top of the show, but like in that orbit of him, who was around him, that, that
I didn't see who else got let. Did other people get let go?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of people who actually, at least one who actually I like very much. This guy, Rob Steffens, who is a legal contractual guy who Rob was great to me. I didn't deal with him that much, but I would have to go up to his office sometimes, just talk some contractual something. I forgot what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was behind the, or at least instrumental in figuring out how Marvel could have its own studio pre-Disney, like how the math could work with the banking, with the investment money. One had legal guys, and none of this is inside information. This is public, like
right. There's a list of guys.
Ike's assistant, who was a VP there, at least that was her title towards the end, and one of his basically his main security guy. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. That name. There's probably some other ones too, but unbelievable week though with Iger with
security guy.
I'm sorry, Wilson.
The main security guy.
Yeah, I know his name. I just don't want to.
No. I understand. Yeah, I'm just wondering. We're thinking about the same guy because that's the guy I had to team up to catch the thief with. So
probably it's most likely.
Okay.
And that person actually was nice to me too. But when I was going back there, I had to meet with him as all new employees did, or during the interview process, to be vetted. Yeah, and I remember being asked, like, aside from like a credit check, which you can't do, I think legally now for job interviews, you can't do credit.
We couldn't do it back then either, but that was the way they.
Oh, maybe, but
which thief did you have to catch? Which
the one that stole artwork from us during the Thanksgiving break. There was a major theft where it was inside job only in the sense of he had to get into Marvel to do it.
Was he the guy who was the artist?
Yes. Okay. I don't give out the name, but yes.
Yeah.
It's who you thinking of?
I don't remember that. I don't remember his name actually. He wasn't that well known.
So not to climb on your story, Darren, but it was more of the sense of we had a break-in. This happened during the Thanksgiving holiday. This is all.
Do you remember the year by chance?
I would have to look it up. I don't recall the year. This is why we're still at 387. There is news articles about it when it happened because Bob Harris let me go on the internet and announce that we had to break in, which was never, because it was so many pieces of artwork, I was able to figure out what it was that was taken. Only because of the filing system we had, and it was more of like because of what I couldn't tell you the exact page number, but I could tell you issue whatever of X-Men are missing. That are like 4 pages from X-Men, such and such, 5 pages from Spider-Man, whatever it was to count. I was able to put that on the internet and be able to say, hey, this has happened. These are the missing pages. Be on the lookout. And I contacted every art rep that I knew, and it turned out that he resold it to somebody that contacted us and said, I think we have your artwork. He did not know it was stolen, and he wanted to give it back. And I had teamed up with that security guy to figure out who did it. and we were going through cameras and stuff like that. We saw where things were being weird. We saw, because with the cameras, you can see who's coming in and out.
I remember that lunatic now. Right. I don't know his name. I never met him, but that's one of the times they threatened to fire Dan. Because after you found the art thief, he uncovered a gambling ring at Marvel, which was us in the bullpen playing fantasy football.
Yeah. That was the problem, is that the security guy, basically his mentality, or the way I saw it, was you're guilty of something and I'm going to find it.
And they threatened to fire Dan if we ever mentioned fantasy football again. So we continued to play fantasy football. We just didn't mention it.
Yeah.
It was like, matter of fact, our fantasy football league is still going. We have the fantasy football league called FOOM, Friends of Old Marvel. Dave Sharp's in it. John Bly's in it. We've been playing fantasy foot. We started in 92. He discovered the illegal gambling ring. By the way, we didn't even play for money at the time. Mm-hmm. We don't play for money. We just play. He discovered the illegal gambling ring somewhere around 97, I think that was. And then we just kind of never mentioned it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I remember them taking Dave's computer.
Yeah.
I remember they physically took his computer.
Lunatics.
And again, when you get here, I'll tell you what happens when you get laid off from Marvel. The second time that it happened, which happened to stick. The first time didn't stick too well. The second time that I got laid off, I was called to the day before my birthday, on January 5th. I'm called to HR, and I get there, and it was like, "What's my boss doing here, and why are we sitting there?" And it was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And it's like, "Well, Marvel's going a different direction than you are. We're going to have to let you go." But no real reason why I got fired. It's just that, you're getting let go. It's all right, fine. By the time I got back to my office, my computer was gone.
Yeah.
They take it as well. And the reason why is because when people used to get fired, they would say a goodbye letter in an email. And because of that, they was like, "Oh, we won't let you say goodbye. We won't let you do a mass exit." It's just go. But I was surprised that they let me pack my office by myself and didn't have anyone standing there. I was really surprised about that.
Yeah.
Because like, here I am standing in a room with what could be millions of dollars worth of artwork. Mm-hmm. And the security guy did come by and says, "How's it going? Do you need anything?" I think I could use a couple of boxes. And then that was it.
Happy employees tend to do better job and look forward to going to work. The folks at the top don't care. Oh, that is 100% true. Matter of fact, I remember talking to Carl Potts, the editor, at a convention a few years ago. And he was talking about how he and Tom DeFalco and Hobson we're going to write a book on leadership and how if you wanted your workplace to be a fun workplace, it has to come from the top down. And that is so true. And that's why Marvel was so fun in the 90s, because Hobson, right? Is that the publisher?
Mike Hobson.
Mike Hobson. He was invested in the idea of the myth of the Marvel bullpen. He liked that. So therefore, Marvel was a fun place because he was the boss. And he wanted Marvel to be a fun place. As soon as Ike took over, and he was not interested in Marvel being a fun place. That whole fun Marvel culture just slowly died.
And that was what I was warned about. I knew Mike a little bit, not when I was an intern, but actually even after my second time at Marvel, because he was kind of like a mentor to Sven Larson, and Sven is how I got into Marvel, because that was my internship. I was possibly the first marketing intern. And that was just because of timing. And I knew Mike later on a little bit when I was at Teshkill working with Sven. And Mike was great. He was a very fun guy, long publishing background, pre-comics, long and very mentoring, very kind person. So I liked him quite a bit. But I mean, you just said, Jared, my intern days in 93, 94, that was the tail end of the Funhouse time. at Marvel. Like that set the precedent for me what a job could be and what a work environment could be. And I don't think anything is compared since, but we've had this discussion on the show and off the show about like how
if your boss doesn't want you to have fun, you're not having fun.
Yeah, but we think though.
And
like
what's up, Comic Crack? We're gleeful that Ike Promoter got fired from Disney. That's what we're doing. We're telling crazy Ike stories. Very cool, Jared. That fantasy football. The illegal gambling ring was discovered at Marvel.
I remember that. But we remember, and I don't blame them for this too much. The days of art supplies, just like take whatever you want, bring it home. Like I think I still have X-Acto knife blades from like.
Well, that was a budgeting thing.
Yeah,
they had keys to the.
That's right. That's right.
That art supply room wasn't open. But that was there used to be in the boom years what we call the endless art supply closet. But also they would supply all of the Marvel artists with brushes and paper and ink and whatever they needed to make comics. You could come into the office and get.
Right.
But also if you worked in the office, you could come and get some stuff too. But that's a corporate budget thing.
Yeah, that's why I didn't think it was that unreasonable when that went away.
If your budget for supplies that quarter was $5,000 and you only spent $3,000, that means the next quarter you only get $3,000. That's how every budget works in every place, in corporate, everywhere.
Even in education too. I remember my parents were both in education. I remember them saying, if I don't spend my budget, then they just slash my budget for the next time around. So
that's how it works everywhere. So that's why everybody loved it. You could go in and get art supplies. How cool.
Yeah, when I was early coloring, and I had gotten a 96 marker color set, the Pantone Trio markers, with refills. And I still have those to this day because I have the refills. They don't even make those markers anymore.
You could go into Dawn or Virginia and say, I need this or I need that. And they'll go, okay, it's in the budget. We'll order it. And they'll order it and give it to you.
I got it from Dawn. I had gotten those markers.
Because that's what that budget was for.
Yep.
Our artists could even, most of the stuff was colored with Dr. Martin's dye. They had a room with these big quart or half-gallon bottles of Dr. Martin's dyes. So if you were a colorist, you'd go into Marvel, you bring your 25 little bottles, whatever size, lid almost came off that, ink bottles you got, and you'd fill up all your bottles with their big bottle of Dr. Martin's dye. That's how comics got colored. Though I wonder... let me do I have a sheet of that paper around here? I was just
by the way, for years I did not understand coloring comics, how that's a guide for someone else to basically at the time cut out the actual, like I thought it was like photograph or something from like the color, but then once I saw them doing the color coding on it, I'm like, well, how does that work? Like I didn't understand like what I was looking at, and then I learned what that was all about.
Right. This is, I did a drawing on this one. I don't have any sheet. This is what's called Marvel Scrap Bristol. This was everywhere at Marvel in the 90s because Marvel had their covers.
I have a pile like that big still of blank ones. Because they would toss them out.
And Marvel paper was this size, 11 by 17. And you could get like, I think 3 sheets of 11 by 17 out of 1 20 by 30 sheet or something like this. And this was the little bit of scrap that was left over. So Marvel had all their paper. Once again, this is the days when Marvel gave paper to all the artists, so everything was the same right size. And so they pre-printed the paper with all the blue lines on it, and the Marvel Comics and the copyright. Strathmore did the paper. Matter of fact, there's a little Strathmore watermark way down there.
Do they not do that anymore? I thought they still supplied paper to artists.
I don't know if they still, but sometime when Ike took over, we stopped getting this Marvel Scrap Bristol. I don't know if he had anything to do with it. I just assume he did. Because if you could save $5 on shipping by them not shipping this stuff to, because they used to send the boxes of Marvel paper and the box of the scrap Bristol. And the scrap Bristol used to just be around the office, and everybody used it for whenever you needed, a little bit of drawing paper, a little bit of this. All the artists when they come in would take the regular Marvel cable, maybe a little scrap Bristol. It was always sitting around the bullpen. Whenever you needed a little piece of paper, there was the Marvel scrap Bristol. But like I said, in the late 90s, it stopped coming into the office, and I always wondered why.
They used to order that paper from Plaza Art Supplies.
Okay.
And then that Plaza closed. So then you had to get the paper from, I think,
John Romita worked directly with Strathmore to get that paper made, though.
So it would be delivered to Plaza. Plaza would cut it.
Yeah.
Then Plaza closed. Then the paper was moved to Sam Flax.
Okay.
A little further downtown. So one of the artists that I worked with found out the Marvel paper that's used before they print the blue line on it could be bought at this one place. So we would go there and buy the whole sheet of paper.
They literally called it Marvel paper.
Yeah, to have them cut it. The thing is that they never told Sam Flax how to cut the paper. So it was Marvel paper being printed with that with that mark that you showed, the Strathmore mark.
Right, the watermark. Yep.
The watermark would be on the regular paper. Because they were never told how to cut that paper.
Okay.
So I went down there as a freelancer, not a representative of Marvel, saying I want to buy this paper, and it was like they could not get the concept of how to get 3 pages out of that. Because you would get 3 pages, you would get that strap
Bristol.
So you get the 3 pages, that extra bristle, and a long, thin line would be done. So I'm talking to the guy and I'm explaining, well, can you give me one whole sheet? Let me see it. And he brings out the whole sheet and he goes, some people like that watermark. That goes onto the artwork. It makes the artwork more expensive. And I told the guy, look, this piece of paper isn't worth anything until I draw Spider-Man on it. So don't tell me that watermark is what sells it. Because that watermark, comic people don't care because they're not buying the original art. So he didn't like me saying that. And I took 3 Marvel papers out of my bag and I lined it up. Here's the puzzle. Here's the extra piece you would get. And then you get this long, thin piece. That long, thin piece could be tossed out. We don't care about that. And then for a while, I was getting my paper, the Strathmore paper, cut that way. But I had to show them how to cut it. And they were getting ready to do a big order for Marvel. But they no one knew how to do the cut. So I accidentally saved Marvel some money by teaching the guy how to cut it correctly for Marvel. Because it goes from there, goes to whatever printer they use to put the blue line onto it.
Okay.
But I kind of had to show them. So I could see them.
The paper would go from Strathmore to Sam Flax, who cut it, and then to the printer to put the blue line on it?
I'm guessing so. I don't know who printed onto the paper.
But there was no blue line on it when you saw it.
There was no blue line on it when I ordered it. It was just a big Strathmore paper.
Okay.
And then
I never knew that.
That's where the little extra strap came from.
I always wondered why that Marvel scrap Bristol stopped coming into the office. Probably because Sam Flax didn't send it.
I'm guessing so. I guess it was
because they were clueless.
Yeah.
But speaking of original art, you're not going to believe this. I bought a second page of Mary Boppers. Bad Space Lady. I was like, I have to get that second page of more. I don't know if Darren saw this. I bought this last month. I just stumbled onto this on eBay.
Well, what is this? I didn't just educate me.
It's this comic I'd never heard of from Harvey Comics called Bunny.
I was going to say it looks like Archie kind of
Yeah, it's an Archie type comic. It's Howie Post drawing it, but at the bottom was this drawing of this woman who's, I guess, the villainess of the piece, called Mary Boppers, the Bad Space Lady, and she's flying on her broom, going, "Ooh, I dig those good old bad vibrations." So I was like, I just fell in love with this panel, so I had to get the page, and I got it. Then the guy also he had this other page which has more Mary Boppers in it, where she flies into with these evil. She just flies into the room with these evil guys, and she's like smoking a cigar and blowing smoke in his face.
Are you buying these directly from the artist, or are they?
No,
from,
I'm buying these from somebody in Canada who pops over the border to Montana to mail them.
Are these oversized pages? Is this?
Yeah, these are 16 by 20.
They look. Yeah, I was gonna say they look giant.
Yeah, twice up. I think they call them.
Yeah,
and obviously Howie Post drew her boobs too big because they whited them out and made them smaller. But Mary Boppers, Bad Space Lady, is my favorite new character from 1969.
Is that so those pages, those are recent pages, obviously, though. I mean, they look brand new.
These are from 1969.
You're kidding me. They look like the ones you just showed us are from 69?
These are from 1969.
I thought they were like...
No.
I mean, that they're double side, that they're two up makes sense then because of the time period. But like, I didn't, for some reason, I was having a brain fart thinking that this is some kind of recent book.
And the pages, and obviously no blue lines at Harvey because these pages aren't even the same size.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if I were to line them up, they don't even. This one's an inch wider. And they're not even really square. So someone just cut these out. Howie Post probably just cut these out of whatever, got them around the right size. Whammo! Do I dig those good old bad vibrations? Here's where I get a piece of the action. And her name is literally Mary Boppers, Bad Space Lady. I was just like, I gotta have these pages.
Anything printed on the back?
What was that?
Is there anything printed on the back? Some of those older stuff will have stamps and whatnot. Sometimes they'll have the Comics Code stamp.
It just has a date in the bottom corner, March 7th, 1969. So that's the only thing printed on the back.
I mean, were these pages preserved in plastic sleeves or something? They look like
one of them came in a very old, and this one's got a drawing on the back too.
Mm-hmm.
Of Mary Boppers, a little sketch. Right. Where is it? It's very light. I'm showing through the page, so it's tough to see. But man, and they weren't that. They were $100 a piece. Not even terribly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
From what I've seen, like mainly for Howie Post artwork, he did so much of them. They would just be piled up. So I would not be surprised that there was a pile of artwork that just never seen the light of the sun.
Yeah,
years, and that's why
those
pages look so pristine.
Yeah.
I never even knew Bunny existed. I never even heard of the comic until I stumbled on only because I think someone else found it on this show. Last year when I was collecting the pop art comic book covers, someone pointed out a Bunny one. I think Bunny number 4, which I haven't gotten yet, has a pop art cover. And so I was looking that up on eBay, and pages to Bunny 11 popped up. I was like, let me get a look at these. No, they're pretty cool. But then I saw Mary Boppers, Bad Space Lady. And I was like, I got to get this one. Now I have to actually get the comic to see what colors.
Do you own it? I know you've been gifted original art. Do you own? Have you bought a lot over the years, or just selectively really what you?
I have. I've got, I don't know, a few dozen pages of original, but I don't buy expensive stuff. I buy stuff that catches my eye. Like,
I own one piece, and that's it.
That's it.
That I bought when I was a teenager. I can tell you exactly what it is. It is a page from X Factor 5. It is not the Apocalypse cameo at the end, obviously. Okay. But it's Jackson Guice. Is it Juice or Guice, right?
Geis.
And
Geis.
Rhymes with nice.
It doesn't even have any X characters on the page. It's some of the villains of the I remember paying like $40 for it back, for a teenager, $40 back in the day. I bought it probably circa late 80s.
I have some of the stuff. Like I've got some indie comics pages from an indie comic I don't even have. I just happened to be tooling around on eBay like 10, 15 years ago. Saw some pages for relatively cheap, like 3 pages for $100, and I was like, "All right, these look nice." I think they were done in what's his name? Chris Gerusso's studio mate, Green. All of a sudden, his name flew right out of my head. Not Dan Green, but Chris Gerusso. He's actually been on the show before. He did Emma Frost years ago in the early 2000s. All of a sudden, I can't remember his first name. His last name is Green. Randy Green. That's it. Randy Green. He shares a studio with Chris Gerusso, and when Chris has been on the show, Randy's actually shown up and said hi. But before I even met him via this show, I one day saw just an auction for like 3 of the Emma Frost pages, and they weren't really like spectacular pages. They were just like everyday kind of pages, but there's like 1 or 2 panels on each page that I liked. So I ended up paying like not that expensive, $150 for all 3 pages, and they went into my collection too. So most of my stuff is not that expensive stuff that I just happen to like.
Yeah, so you like. So it's. I think it's. I've read that Simonson has kept all of his stuff over the years.
He was smart. He kept all his pages.
Smart because just meaning because he just is so attached to his art, which we understand that.
Smart because artists are on the wrong end of the supply chain for the escalating price of comic. Like most comic book artists I know sold all their pages as soon as they could. But meanwhile, that it's like if you had kept why sell them if you don't? I can understand it was like they'd rather have $50 now than $5,000 20 years from now. And to me, it's like if they didn't have to sell, like I'm friends with Bob Wyachek. He sold all his Star Wars pages years and years ago. Those Star Wars pages are worth a fortune now. People always ask him about it. And if he had kept them, he could have, he really could have used them now. But most people don't have that kind of foresight.
Do you think Simonson has kept them just for that reason, or just because he's just attached to them? Like, I don't he.
I have to figure he kept. I never asked him, but I have to figure he kept them on purpose because he thought it was a good idea to keep them. Because almost no comic book artists do that. So that I would have to think that had to be a conscious choice.
I mean, there's 2 covers that. Thinking of like Thor, I guess 337, and then X Factor, the first Archangel, where he's like flying towards the camera. Mm-hmm. I should think both of those can go well into the 6 digits based on people from that era.
And if he had sold those in the 80s, they would have gone for $600.
Right, that's exactly right. Like the kayfabe guys have talked about. There's some. It might be that Jim Lee X-Men 268 with Wolverine, Captain America, and Black Widow. If you know the image you're talking about, that was he sold for like 600 back. That number at that time, and that thing probably would go for easily $500,000 now, based on the
foolish Rub the Blood '90s cover art sold today for $40,000. Rub the Blood? I don't even know that one.
It's a Image Blood Strike.
It was one of the gimmicks of the heyday. So you would put your hand on the cover, and the heat of your hand will change the cover to the color of blood. Because there was spots. There were spots that kind of looked like the cover color. So when you put your hand on it, it would be more red and make it look like blood.
I couldn't make it work. I know I have that book. It's an image. It might be Blood Strike or something. Like I could not make it work. Maybe I got the comic later on, and maybe it wore off or the reactiveness of the ink or something. But I was like, what's it supposed to do? I don't get it.
That was the way it was explained to me, that it was like this is brand new technology that they have, the way they sold all these things.
Yeah, they did the same thing with like Matchbox cars and stuff. They use that paint where you dip it in hot water and it would change the color of the car.
Hey, that Zartan G.I. Joe figure came out was when it reacted with sunlight, he would turn green or something, like he's allergic to sunlight. So that was the big deal.
Oh, I want to show off a comic I got, talking about a little Kickstarter. The last issue of The Great Gatsby adaptation by who is it? Ted Adams is the writer adapting it, and George Coelho. Was I close, Paolo?
It was close a month ago.
Okay.
You're losing it. You have to practice.
Yeah, I have to practice, or I don't get. But I was actually I liked it. I liked the whole series overall. Enjoyed it. I was a little disappointed they left one scene out near the end, one of my favorite scenes. But that's always what it is with adaptations of your favorite book. They have to leave things out and put things in or whatever. So sometimes you can be disappointed if they leave stuff out. But this brings up, remember how I said I don't like doing Kickstarter because it's the most expensive way to buy comics? Well, I took the most expensive way to buy the collected edition of this yesterday when I was like, oh, I wonder when the collected edition is going to be out. So I went to Clover Press's website and saw they had a Kickstarter. So I was like, oh, cool. So I ended up spending $84 for the hardcover, Gilded Edge, with a box around it, autographed by Ted Adams version. And I was just like, I was like, oh, did I just spend $84 on that? Then later on that night, I saw there's a $25 hardcover through Amazon. And I was just like, oh, man, I should have just, it doesn't have the slipcase. It doesn't have the gilded edges, but I'm just like, oh, man. So I bought which is coming this summer, I think, the most expensive version of the collected edition of this. So I was just like, why did I do that? I should have just been patient and got the $25, but I got all excited.
Yeah,
I got all excited.
I think the AWA, Ars Writers Artisans, that's where Axel Alonso
is
the
Clover Press. AWA is doing another one.
Yeah. That's why I mentioned it. Yeah, they're doing theirs.
They're doing the modern take on Gatsby.
Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, they're doing it's an LBGQ trans version of Gatsby. I'm going to get that too, but it's not a straight adaptation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This is a straight adaptation.
What's the company, or is it just this is the first thing they ever put out? This is like
Clover Press. They've done a bunch of stuff. You can find them online and all their stuff. They've done reprints of stuff and comics and this and that.
So they're not exclusively Kickstarter. They do stuff that just where they do print runs. Yeah,
like I got this through the comic shop.
Got it.
Instead of doing a modern reimagining of The Great Gatsby, they should do a 80s, 90s reimagining of The Great Gatsby, where everybody
Gatsby in space.
Where everybody would have mullets, and everybody would be drawn in close-ups with their teeth gnashing.
Gatsby. But yeah, I was like, I can't. After I did, I was like, I can't believe I just spent $84 on that book.
I wouldn't want you to cancel it because I just cringe but.
Oh, I'm not going to cancel it. I mean, I like the book, no doubt, but still,
at least it's going to be a beautiful book. Yeah.
Usually, I'm just not that impulsive. It's not like I'm going to have to skip a meal to get a book. I got the money, It's not, but still, I'm usually much cheaper than that.
Well, for me, for like a big, nice hardcover book, for me, the tilting point is usually I usually don't want to go over $50. I do have on my shelf behind me, I have a Bob Peak collected edition, like this big oversized thing that his son put together, and I probably funded that somehow and probably paid like $100 for that or something.
like this one right here. This is an illustrated version of Gatsby, not a comic
beautiful
book, graphic novel. By who is it? Two sisters from Italy, Ina and Elena Balbuso. I think this was Kickstarted originally for like $125.
Is it in Italian?
I eventually got it for around 70 plus some. Well, I actually paid $35 cash for it, but I used, credit card bucks on Amazon. But it was really 70. So I waited like 6 months till this came down to a price that I was good with. So it was really weird that I, immediately paid the 84 for the.
Is it is it in Italian? What you're just showing us, or is that in English?
It's in English, but it's just the two Italian artists doing it. So where's an illustration? Hold on, but it's a nice book. Artist notes in the there. There's him in the pool. So there's lots of illustrations, and it's probably I aspire to make my illustrated version as Gatsby as nice as this one.
So it's basically the text of the book with some illustrated plates throughout. The best example I can think of the top of my head would be Wrights and Frankenstein, just in terms of that's
just
the
like
idea.
That. Like Wrights and Frankenstein.
Yeah.
An illustrated version rather than a graphic novel.
What classic American novel still needs to be adapted into a graphic novel?
Oh, so how trying to think of something that would make sense to do sequentially like that, and
Gatsby is actually a really easy adaptation in terms of it's all dialogue and narrative. So I think that lends itself to being adapted into comics. I don't know.
I'm thinking maybe Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn.
Those exist.
Yeah. John.
I don't know what exists and what doesn't. But then also my mind now also goes to Classics Illustrated and what's been done, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So you're trying to think of something that maybe just became public domain or something that hasn't been done yet.
Probably. I think Fury and Loathing in Las Vegas would be a good graphic novel, but you still have to pay royalties.
Right.
I've never read that one.
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh went to public domain recently.
Mm-hmm.
And the last 6 months,
you can't choose the Disney designs.
Yeah, you just can't use the Disney design, which is fine. Just use the original designs. The only difference between the original design and the Disney design is the shirt.
Lord Tatman's buying 10 hardcovers a month for the last 6 months. Woo! I did that for a little while. I just like comics as periodicals. I really do. I like going there. I love going to the comic shop every week. I love coming on and talking about the comics every week. That's part of it for me. I bought the Absolute Blackest Night edition that cost a small fortune. I must be out of my mind.
Yeah.
At least some of those you can resell. Like I've spent some money on omnibuses over the years that like Marvel omnibuses, once they go out of print, you can resell them. So like Marvel and DC omnibuses, I think you can at least resell. I don't know about that reselling that To Kill a I have a To Kill a Mockingbird one that is excellent. Where is that? That's over here. To Kill a Mockingbird. Is that it? The Great Gatsby. I don't know where it went. I thought it was right over there, but I have. There is a version of To Kill a Mockingbird that is really good. I can't remember who did it, but I think I got it last year, the year before, and it's one of the best comic novel to comic adaptations I've read. So.
You probably need to do a lot of close-ups and dramatic shadowing on the faces because there's not a lot of action in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, it's just very it's very well drawn and laid out, and the drawings are very sensitive. I think it was a watercolor. There's some watercolor in it, so it really captured the mood of the book well. I think is what it was. I start to forget storylines, especially when books are late. See that's all part of it for me. It's okay for me to Is it recent, Jared? Yeah, it came out in the last couple of years. I thought it was right over here. Now it's driving me crazy. Where can I possibly move it to? This is where I keep all my adaptations.
In France, they're doing more adaptations. There was a French science fiction novelist called Stéphane Voul. I have one of his books. It's been published in Portuguese, and I think they're going to do another adaptation pretty soon. Since I like the first story, if it gets published in Portuguese, I might buy it. But I'll see if I can get the version in French if necessary. The science fiction stories, you'll probably have to look for some things that, while not obscure, they may only appeal to connoisseurs.
Well, Metropolis, I think, recently became public domain. I think this year.
The movie, yeah.
The movie did. Okay, so not.
See, Pal, that's what I thought your original question was. What literary stuff is in public domain that can be, that's and not just because Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. When was that written, in the 50s or 60s? Maybe more recently than that.
Yeah, it's too recent. Because
I read Deadly Class 1 Library Edition yesterday. Blown away by Wes Craig does a chase scene in issue 6, I think it was. That was just spectacular. Deadly Class I've talked about this before, was one of my favorite books until about issue 25, where something happened in the plot that ruined it for me. But man, Wes Craig's art is good in that. In stock trades, there's some really good sales. They do, but they From about like 2008 to 2010, there were so few monthly comics that I was buying that I started getting more collected editions just for that like 2 or 3 year period. And eventually there started to be more comics. Like when Saga started and sort of that whole Image revolution took off, all of a sudden there was tons of comics I wanted to buy. And one of the problems I found with buying collected editions was, especially cheap ones, when a collected edition is like, $5, you're like, why not buy it? You can end up with a huge stack of collected editions that you have no interest in really quickly. And it just, all of a sudden, it can be overwhelming. It's like, ooh, I want to try. That one's $5. That one's $5. That one's $5. When you try it, when you spend $4 on a comic, you've got one thin comic to try. And if you don't like it, it's one thin comic. When you spend $5 on a trade, you all of a sudden got a half-inch worth of comics. And you spend 10, you buy 10 of those, and all of a sudden you've got 5 inches worth of comics that you don't like. So I found that I got a little overwhelmed buying a lot of trades.
A lot of problem for me with hardcovers is that I think
that was good stuff. That was good
with hardcovers, especially, is I think like the book you just showed, Jared, like it's so beautifully designed. And it's so well packaged, and the production value is so great. I don't even want to open it because, like, even like the little crack will like make me cringe. I'm like, oh my god, this piece of art that So
usually if it's bound well enough, everything's good.
Yeah.
Like, has Catcher in the Rye ever been adapted? I haven't noticed it.
Don't know.
I don't think so.
Rick Remender's reprinting Black Science and Fear Agent Library editions. I ordered the Black Science, the whole big in one. That I don't think it's the library edition because it's soft cover, but it's like all 43 issues in one soft cover edition for like $60. That one, but I have all the issues of Fear Agent, so I don't need to buy that one.
The one hardcover I probably many on my Amazon of upcoming Amazon releases or just releases. Corbin Den.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of Corbin stuff. Have you seen? What's the name of the guy, the colorist who's doing the Jorge Villa something?
Oh yeah, I know your name. I think you worked with him back in the day, and so he really knows Corbin's.
I don't think I follow him. What was that?
Villarrubia.
Yeah,
Jose Villarrubia.
I don't follow him, I think, on Facebook, but he pops up in my Facebook feed a lot, or on one of my comics groups or whatever, showing his progress on some of the Corbin stuff, and it's really nice.
I can't wait for that because Dennett back issues have been historically pretty pricey. And I remember the first time I ever saw Corbin's art, it was in black and white because it was probably, I don't think it was reproduced in black and white. I think it might have been ink wash, but it was from Rip in Time, the interiors from that series.
Oh, yeah.
Rip in Time. And I was like, this is amazing.
The book that nobody had the last issue of.
Is that it? We might have talked about this. Sounds familiar. It was like so scarce.
For some reason, the last issue of that didn't ship or something weird happened to it. Like everybody I knew had issues 1 through 4 and not 5. And
I always
when
wanted
mycomicshop.com opened, I got issue 5.
I always wanted Den. Love the covers. Love Corbin's art. So it's been taking years, but it's for that. I mean, it's been packaged together previously, but long out of print and probably really pricey on eBay. So I'd wish, I know this is tall order, Paulo probably could shed light on this with the we've talked about this, the Mobius stuff that Epic put out in the mid to late 80s, not Airtight Garage, like Arzak and all that stuff was so beautifully done. I remember the house ads, those very late 80s pastel colors. But that was a license for Epic, up until a certain point. And I don't know if those will ever be reprinted to look like that. I have some Mobius stuff in Cal.
You know that they did a horrible recoloring of the Incal in France, and everybody complained. So now they're putting out a new one with the original colors.
Speaking of
I gotta
Mobius,
look after that. Yeah,
I got this. Don't Spit in the Wind. Let me go big so I can show it. A Mad Cave comic. Very sort of Mobius.
The color palette. Yeah, the color palette for sure. Right.
The only I enjoy
looks like Jimmy. It looks like Jimmy Hewlett.
That's because of the inking. That's the part I didn't like. The imagery is very Mobius. The colors are kind of Mobius, but he inks everything with the same pen. And there's not a lot of sensitivity to his line. When you look at Mobius, there's so much sensitivity to his line. When you look at what's his name? Frank Quitely, got a Frank Quitely book too. He's got a lot of sensitivity to his line. This is take for example this flamingo. This flamingo right here. There's nothing sensitive about that line. All the little feather indications are the exact same weight as the outline, and all the feathers are the exact same weight, and the legs are the exact same weight. And I just think the guy needs some work with his inking because I like his imagery. His imagery is cool. His drawing is pretty. I mean, it was this cover that sold it to me. This, his storytelling is okay. Coloring gets a little, but it's the inking that lets me down. It's just kind of The inking makes me think he doesn't really know, and especially the single line weight inking with this. He's got this whole moire dot pattern thing going on. It's colored to look like you can see the dots in an old comic book. I don't know if it comes across on the screen, but you can see the line screen. You can see the dots. You can see the line screen, which is not a real line screen. It's, a digital brush.
I'm trying to think the name of that artist. You guys all know him. Forget his name, but his inking. I remember him doing an Avengers book around 2004 or 5, a mini series that with interlocking covers. But his inking is complete, looks just like rapidograph, it's intentionally all same weight, dead line. He gets away with it. And what I mean by that is I actually like it. There's not a lot of people could do that, but something about it I actually really do like the way he does it.
It depends on how sensitive your line is, because what's his name? Frank Quitely here. it looks like it's all one line weight, but it's not really when you look at it. There's a lot of sensitivity to his line. It changes a little bit here and a little bit there. There's not a huge variation in line weight, but there's variation in line weight. And he varies his line weight from like the close-ups to the and he like let me show you. Here's this ape boy who is sort of be the equivalent of that bird, where those little teeny tiny feather, fur in him is just a slightly thinner line than the rest of it. And that's all he needs. That's what he gets away with. So he's got sensitivity to his line that isn't in this one. And like I said, I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know what his choices were. I can't tell, but it just kind of I just wanted more sensitivity in his line if he wants to go for that style. Meanwhile, the Ambassadors was solidly okay. This is another Mark Miller project. 6 issues, different artist each issue. Somebody is going to give superpowers to 6 people in the world. Will you be one of them? It's exactly how you would expect it to be. Frank Quitely made the issue. I mean, the Frank Quitely artwork is what sold me on this, and it's what made the issue. The story itself was but I think I can't remember who the lineup of artists is, but I liked them all because Mark Miller can pay him a bit with that Netflix money or Amazon money, whatever money he has.
It's Willy Wonka meets Village of the Damned.
Yeah, something like this. Matter of fact, she references Willy Wonka in this. But it's really, it's the Frank Quitely artwork. It's just terrific. It's because there's not much of a story, but he tells it so well. Frank Quitely has a lot of sensitivity to his artwork that you wouldn't think, being a sort of over-the-top superhero guy.
Scott Collins is who I was thinking of. Scott Collins.
Oh, yes. Scott Collins. Yeah, he draws all in pencil.
That's the coloring to the shading.
He's one of those single line weight guys. Have you ever seen his original art?
Never.
He draws on one side of the page, then flips it over and sort of draws on the other side of the page. Like he almost inks it with a pencil on the other side of the page.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that, but I remember seeing the miniseries I was thinking of is called Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Yeah, I love that thing.
Yeah, it was published the reason I know is because it was published when I was at Marvel the second time, 2004-ish, right? And I remember being like, because that's like the kind of thing, like, well, first of all, I like all kinds of styles, as we all do on this call, right? But it's the thing you always would hear about line weight, like, artists should always vary their line weight. And this was like as consistently the same weight, no matter what it was, whether it was outside the character, like a holding line, or anything was the exact same weight. But somehow for me, it really worked. I liked it a lot.
Well, that's because Scott Collins could draw. Yeah. His drawing could carry his lack of line weight stuff. And it was a stylistic choice to show off his drawing. And he really could draw. I watch YouTubers like you and Comic Crack and Sleepy Reader to know what's good or not. I watch those two too to find good stuff. Went to a book fair yesterday and at the end had to ask for a moving trolley. Books for $1 to $3. I couldn't carry all his books. Jared, did you read Barry Windsor Smith Monster? I did read it and liked it a whole lot. Yeah, we discussed that one when it came out. I enjoyed that one. I was looking forward to it, but it was actually better than I thought it was going to be. It didn't really. Pooh Goes Wild. Salinger was always a no arm rights when he was alive. Okay, so he'd give out the rights. Yeah. Barry Windsor Smith's Monster I liked a lot. It had those Hulk origins, they said, but it really didn't seem anything like. I was expecting it to kind of be like some kind of Hulk story, and it was nothing like. It was its own thing, 100%. Barry Windsor Smith's Monster.
That's fairly recent, right?
Yeah. It came out last year, the year before.
I need a copy of it just to compare it with the Hulk pages I have.
Oh, that's right. You have some of those photocopies of those pages?
Yeah, I have to dig those out. They're in a FedEx box somewhere, full of just a bunch.
Do you
of
have those scanned in?
Those I do not have scanned in. My scanner
I
had
was
died
thinking
way before I got to scan that in.
One of the things I want to do, I'll have to borrow those then, is because I've scanned in like all of my photocopies that I have from my Marvel days, and I've scanned in all of Ed Murr's photocopies and I want to make like a Dropbox archive of them, so that we can all sort of have them as a some sort of resource in case someone like if you want to practice your inking on 90s pages, I can scan to the pencils that I practiced my inking over. So I just kind of want to build an online resource of sort of that ephemera that disappeared, that we all had at one time, but disappears over the ages. Because as far as I know, nothing like that exists. What was that?
I'd like to see one thing in 90s terms. I mean, what would it look like if you tried to ink Todd McFarlane in the style of Vince Colletta?
Good question. Mm-hmm. But I think that'd be a good online, a good archive to have, even if historians want to use some of that crap. Mm-hmm. You guys into Hickman? I bought his Avengers omnibus. I like his indie stuff.
Here's the thing. Hickman is like Bendis. You see something in his... If you find out about him, you see something interesting, then you notice that he repeats it a lot. And by the time you get to his third work, you're bored with it.
I like his indie stuff. I've read. I can't remember his last indie stuff I've read, but I like that. But his Marvel stuff, the League of
Secret Warriors. It was kind of raw but fun. Fantastic Four, he got the characters very, very well. Avengers.
The League of Reeds made me not want to read his FF.
But it kind of works. But Avengers is very, very boring. It's years of nothing happening. And the Avengers twiddling their thumbs.
Did he write Manhattan Projects?
Yeah.
Was that him? I liked that. And I know I bought a couple others of his indie series. Good thing no one told me he will have sex or photocopies or you wouldn't have any of those pages. Yeah. They told me that. But no, that was before Ike. We got all those pages. I dislike Bendis and Slott. I'm not a Marvel or DC guy, so I mean I don't like Bendis. I like some of Slott's stuff, but I haven't read a ton because he does all Marvel stuff.
Didn't Dan work on staff in Marvel in some capacity before he?
No, he was never on Avengers.
I'm just thinking of Peter. I'm thinking of Peter or David. Then maybe that's yeah.
Peter David. Dan Slott was always around though. He was Dan Slott. I gotta say, I was amazed that he became a fan favorite writer in the early 2000s because he was one of those guys in the 90s, nice guy too, who was kind of always hanging around Marvel, always picking up a writing, and he was like. And the way you got writing work in the 90s was you were some editor's favorite. And so they gave you writing work. He was never anyone's favorite, but he used to pick up some work here, some work there, some work. And all the stuff he wrote through the 90s was, nothing of note to anyone. But he always picked up enough little jobs here and there. And then somehow in the early 2000s, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how I wasn't really there, just because I think it was after it may have even been the late 2000s.
What did he get big on? She-Hulk?
What was that?
Was he writing She-Hulk? Was that
She-Hulk?
He did a very good Shield series.
Yeah, with the Mike Mayhew covers.
Everybody always liked the humor in his writing all through the 90s.
Right.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have before he did Shield, I have a Great Lakes Avengers series miniseries that he did. I also found that very funny.
I remember that, with Flatman and
He was sort of a cult writer. He was, people who liked that sort of humor with their superheroes because I knew a few fans of his who liked his stuff, but he was a cult writer under the like I said, and he was never an editor's favorite, so he never really broke through. So I don't know how he broke through, but he never gave up. So that was, and it was a good decade to 15 years that he was just sort of a cult favorite, below the radar writer. So I mean, it was a long.
You may have become friends with Axel Alonso or something.
What was that?
You may have become friends with Axel Alonso.
I don't know, maybe because I think he got some work in DC in the early 2000s, and I didn't see him during those years. I'm not sure exactly.
He worked at the offices in Marvel because he did art returns for a while.
He did art. When did he do art? I don't remember him ever doing art returns.
I don't remember the exact years. Obviously, it was before me with Ruth De Hoya. I do not know who was before her, but
Tony
I do know
Mateus.
that then it was before
her.
So
I don't. As far as I know, he didn't do art returns, but who knows?
Yeah, he did it. He was there when because I saw a photograph of him in the office with.
Well, he was always in the office.
Those are the days he did art returns. Because the first time I met with him, we had a conversation about it, but I don't remember the years.
Yeah, I have no memory of him doing art returns, but that was a long time ago.
But I don't know the years.
Listen, I always remember him being around the office looking for, because there were certain guys who were always around the office looking to pick up work, and I don't know. I don't think he was ever an assistant editor there, but he was always a nice guy too. He was chatty, kind, nice guy. That's why whenever I hear people saying bad things, he's misbehaving online or something like that, I'm like, Dan Slott? He's not really the misbehaving type. So
then I think when Dan Slott got famous, he started having opinions.
Yeah, I think he always had opinions, but no one heard them except us. But his opinions were hardly out of line. Well, they were out of line with conservatives. So.
Also, it turns out he had a ghostwriter.
He had a ghostwriter?
Yeah.
When did he ever need a ghostwriter? I mean, it must have been when he was doing a lot of work, because he had no need of a ghostwriter in the 90s and early 2000s. But yeah, he was always a good, nice guy, Dan. Mm-hmm.
But Jonathan Hickman...
Last 5 years, I've been collecting high-grade silver and golden age books. Whoa. Spent a lot of cash, but didn't read much, so I'm playing catch-up.
You can actually find... very cheap golden age books if you avoid the big publishers and the big characters.
And I gotta say,
I watch two channels. They buy a lot of of golden age stuff and stuff from the 1950s, Jumbo Comics and Night Tiger Comics. And if you go for stuff that was published by Avon or it comes from the guys who published Daredevil comics, Lev Gleason, you end up finding stuff that costs $5-10 easy and in fairly decent shape.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to buy the Action Comics and Detective Comics, you're out of luck.
And the one thing too about collecting high grade like Silver and Golden Age stuff is you can always sell it later.
Mm-hmm.
Like that stuff's not hard. I mean, you get it graded. That stuff's not hard to sell.
Well, you saw that.
I think in general, like if you get the desirable ones, if that's what you're collecting, like all the stuff I buy is hard to sell. I mean, it may only be buying it off the stands or whatever, but I've got tons of comics. Nobody wants to buy Cerebus in Hell. I got however many issues of this. Nobody's going to be buying them. But here's the latest, and I have to say, if you saw my weekly video, I was a little hesitant about this one because it's Cerebus and the woman thing, Roe versus Wade. I was like, oh, Dave Sim making Roe versus Wade jokes, that could be very cringy. And let me show you. This was also a parody of one of my favorite comics from my childhood, Spider-Man and Man. This is one of my favorite comics from my childhood. And of course the cover is a visual pun rowing and wading. So row versus wade, Cerebus is rowing, Swamp Thing is wading. But this one was actually a funny issue because the whole joke was Cerebus and his girlfriend, the Whore of Babylon, were. Let me go to the beginning. There's the Whore of Babylon. Cerebus and his girlfriend, the Whore of Babylon, were trying not to make jokes about Roe versus Wade, so they're just making mean jokes to each other. So the whole issue was Cerebus in hell and the Whore of Babylon just being mean to each other. So it was actually a pretty funny issue because I can't remember. Some of these issues are unreadable. Like this was a funny issue. I enjoyed it. I think it was the last issue. I was like I couldn't even make it through it. Sometimes they're like that. So, but I know that going in. Slot was a dick to me on Twitter and then blocked me. Yeah, but that's Twitter. I mean, when you're just imagine all the people being a dick to some people, because people, when people are like dicks to famous people on Twitter or wherever, they think that's okay. They think, well, I just said this, but you're the 90th person to say that. So I can understand like anybody who's even slightly famous blocking people on Twitter and giving off that dick because you have to put. I mean, I have somebody be a dick to me on social media like 3 times a year. And I used to get mad at them and say something bad. Now but imagine if that happened like 30 times an hour. That's like a whole different world. So I being that I know Dan personally and know he's a really nice guy, I always take that with a grain of salt. Jerk Comic Reviews, my G.G. Allen book, and Mailbag gave me a long, great review. He's a G.G. Okay. Jerk Comic Reviews. I don't think I've heard of him. Brought a CGC ASM 4994 for $1K, but man, the book sleeve was printed yesterday. So yeah, that like I said, a book like that you can always sell.
Yeah,
I mean, I had a
Google
blowing up, but at least I know if I did, I could always sell it again if I needed.
I had to Google that cover to know what it was, and then I was like, oh yeah, I had the Marvel Tales reprint of that, circa 86, 87.
Which cover is it? 49.
It's Craven and Vulture fight. Both fighting Spider-Man.
I was actually the Epic collection where that comic is costs $50, and I have other comics with it. So
me too. I've got the digital version of it. Slot went on and on about a tweet I made about a gun I had. He started DMing me. I don't know what the heck. Hopefully he learned not to do that because when you first get on Twitter, you think it's a good idea to engage with. My rule is never argue with strangers on the internet. I mean, I used to, but I know not to now. There's no point.
Yeah, I learned not to engage. Not that I was ever that aggressive, but like occasionally.
Neither was I, but
yeah.
If I was
very occasionally
back then, I might have been.
Yeah. It took me a couple of weeks to let me reply. Wait, let me think. Okay, let's not reply.
Yeah. It happened just this week. Just 2 weeks ago on Twitter with somebody saying something that I thought was just dumb. And I'm like, you know what? I just said, really? I never heard of that. Yeah, but it was actually somebody who, well, this is interesting because they were wrong too. Somebody on Twitter would I don't even know who it was. I don't know why I showed it. Said that they were reading some book and they had to stop reading the book because he wrote Legos. And the guy was like, the plural of Lego is Lego, not Legos. So I couldn't. So what else could he get wrong? I was like, everybody I know has been calling them Legos for 50 years. It's like, then everybody you know is wrong. And I was just like, and then I realized that's corporate speak. There is actually no plural to Legos. There's no plural to Lego, just like there's no plural to Sony. There's no plural to Exxon. There's no plural to Marvel. Marvel Comics is a plural. There's no plural to Marvel because it's a corporate name, and they don't even call what we all call Legos colloquially. They call bricks,
right?
Because Lego they don't want to lose the copyright to Lego if
trademark.
every brick gets called Lego.
Yeah, right.
So they never call them Legos, and there's actually no so the name of the company is Lego. The name of the product is bricks. So despite the fact that everyone colloquial calls them Legos, I was like, everybody's wrong. I'm like, well, if you want to buy into corporate speak, everybody's wrong. Yes. And we should all call them what Lego Corporation wants us to call them. But it's like
aspirin.
Aspirin? I just didn't want to argue with this. I was just like,
exactly.
There's no point to me arguing.
Like you can't say you're taking an aspirin. Yeah. Aspirin is a trademark of the Bayer Corporation in Germany.
I think didn't they lose the trademark? That's always the
case. They did. That's the problem. They did. Everybody was calling every painkiller.
And Lego doesn't want that, so they never say Legos.
There was a brand of all-weather jackets called Kispo, and in Portugal we refer to every all-weather jackets as Kispos. So they can't use the trademark here.
Well, this guy may have been right, but he was also wrong.
Yeah.
The plural of Lego is not Lego because there is no plural to Lego. Like
no reason to get worked up. It's like that.
I know.
It's like that discussion.
But I was
Who rotates the Batmobile's tires?
I was not even posting any of this stuff, and I was getting worked up.
Yeah,
but because that's the way the internet is. So I can see why Dan Slott got a bad reputation on Twitter, even though he's a nice guy. Because you just get worked up on and that was just like one day and one. Imagine if 25 people an hour were wrong and I had to straighten them out.
And this is the thing: if you want to read tweets, you have to read them when they come out, because in a few hours there will be a new 1,000 new tweets for you to read. So everybody wants to reply to that tweet now. But if you don't, it'll blow over.
Didn't Slott do the X-Force reboot in the 90s with Milligan?
No,
that
Milligan was the writer. The artist was Mike Allred.
Yeah, Mike Allred, and Milligan was the artist, right? I don't know.
Milligan was
the writer. Allred was the artist. It was odd. I wasn't being mean to him, anything. Yeah, well, that's just it. You don't know. You think you weren't being mean to him, but you don't know because there's no tone on the internet. There's no subtlety. So, I've done that before. I've just written a tweet and somebody thinks I'm being mean to them. And I'm like, no, I'm just saying, because there's no, when you can write something and the other person can read it as mean. And you didn't mean it that way. That's just how it goes. Might look like a maniac and a criminal, but I'm respectful to everyone. That's just it. Respectful doesn't come through on tweets. It just doesn't. As much as you want it to, sometimes respectful, you try to be respectful and you sound condescending because it's like I don't mean to be disrespectful. Oh, there's sarcasm right there. If you lead with I don't mean to be disrespectful, that's saying I'm being disrespectful. So it's like it's tough. I have vids on my channel of my collection if anyone was curious. Okay. Under Lord Tatman, I'll have to check that out.
So I did not make it to the comic book shop this week, but I did find a book that I had gotten as a gift a while ago. And I looked at it and like I never opened it up. And it is a look into what they're calling the DC Vault.
Let's see. Hold on. Let me get the DC Vault.
Yes.
Oh, I think I've seen that one in a museum. It's got a bunch of it's
the ephemera.
Yes.
That DC would have had, and I have no idea about this stuff because I'm a Marvel guy, so I would have collected the Marvel stuff.
I think there's a Marvel one.
Was before I even started collecting comics, so I don't even think there's anything in here that I would have stumbled or have seen. Where at least the Marvel one, we know of Foom, and we know of their early versions of their, not press kits, but their fan clubs.
Mighty Marvel Marching Society.
Right. So you had that with Marvel. So DC, I guess, did their own type of stuff.
But this book is from, I don't know, 2008, 10. I'm basing on the logo on the front cover.
I remember seeing that. I don't know when. I don't know. I can't. Sometime like 10 years ago, I saw it at a museum. I think there's a Marvel version and a DC version.
Yes,
and it was like sort of a box. What was that? 2008? Did
2008, and it's a book in a box.
Right. And it's pretty neat. It's just got a lot of neat stuff in it. Like they actually sold that at a museum bookstore. I can't remember which museum and what the show was. I haven't been to a museum in a decade, I think. So.
I collect a lot of stuff, like not exactly that, but in the ballpark, like comic catalog and stuff from the 80s, like New England comics, and like because I just love like the history of even retailing comics and just like the promo posters that Marvel and DC were putting out.
That reminds me. I was just thinking this week, since Gary Guzzo died, I wonder what's happening to his vast archive of stuff.
Before he passed, he was dealing with I know he was doing some stuff with Heritage Auction.
Yeah.
And I know that he had announced on Facebook sometime before that he was, I want to say, sending stuff to Diamond.
Okay. He may have, because he was friends with what's his name, Steve Geppi.
I think he sold the vast minority of his collection to Steve before he passed away. I think it was a project he was working on last year where he was cataloging everything he owned. And I do know that a lot of stuff was archived and was being sent to Diamond.
I know he's got a ton of marketing materials from Marvel and his rock and roll days.
Yes. So I think that was.
I didn't know
he was cataloging a lot of that stuff. Yeah. I don't know how much of it he had gotten cataloged.
Yeah, that's what I didn't know.
I met him a little bit back in the 90s, maybe after that. He was married to Dawn, correct? Later on. Okay. And when he passed away, which wasn't too long ago, right? Within the last 6 months, maybe. Right. I didn't totally know his whole history, like with collectibles and retailing, all that stuff. So that was really interesting to know that stuff.
Yeah.
He got Wilson into Marvel.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I met him. He owned a comic book shop in Dobbs Ferry called Amazing Tales. And when I started college up in Dobbs Ferry, I went to Mercy College. So that was the local comic book shop that was like I would go into after after classes. I would go there, and I met him. And at the time, I was just starting college, so I was like, maybe I'll sell some books. So he's like, oh, give me a list of the books you have, and I'll see if there's anything to buy. So about a week later, I made the list of the books that I was willing to sell. I come back, and it was like he sold the comic book shop. It was like, oh, we'll hold it. We'll see if the guy who bought it would want them. And I wasn't aware at the time he sold the comic book shop so he could go work at Marvel. So he sold the comic book shop to Rick. So Rick was like, no, I don't want any of these books. I just bought a comic book shop. And it was like one of those things where I hung out at that comic book shop so long they started paying me. So I ended up working there. And through that is where I met Gary again, because he still lived in the town. And he would stop by the shop to do some announcements, what books are coming in and stuff like that. And he knew I had now this is like 2 years condensed. So he had already sold the shop. He was working for Marvel for a while. And he gave me his card and said, why don't you call up and, we can find out about an internship. I just thought he was being nice. So I took the card and never called. And then I ran into him in the street and he's like, look, I was serious about, the internship program, find out if you could get credit from the college. And so turned out it's like the college was like, you can get college credit, but you already have enough credits to graduate. So these are going to be extra credit. It's like, for me to work at Marvel, yes, I'll take those extra credits. And that's how I ended up getting into the comic biz that way. So I worked retail for a short couple of years. and then worked at the office.
And Gary's role was like director of promotions, or am I getting this completely wrong?
That's promotion conventions is what we handle out of that department. So it was a form of marketing, but that's the direct contact for like the periodicals that dealt with marketing comic books. So Wizard Magazine went through our office. CBG, anything that was basically a periodical for comics went through our office to get all the information. So the press releases were coming out of there. And like I said, we ran the conventions departments, posters that were being created.
Right.
I was working with the art director on that. So we made posters, pins, buttons, a lot of ephemera that way too.
Do you know what year he started at Marvel, actually?
I want to say 91, 92.
Oh, Gary, that's when he started.
I wasn't there until 93, 94.
Right.
And he was already there for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he started 90, 91, I think.
Another comic I got this week, I don't even remember. Indigo Children #1, double size issue. I can't even remember it. It made no impression. Something about gifted kids and superpowers, and I don't know. They called it a subtle story. Being that I read it on Thursday and can't remember it on Friday. I don't think I'm getting another.
Who's the publisher on that? I'm always curious.
It's Image, and they have two of the most generic blurbs on the back. One from Kieran Gillen. Nice work from Curtain Company. Postmodern science fiction with formulist execution. The whole team just sings. I have no idea what that means. None whatsoever. You could put that on the back of any book. I wouldn't know. And then Matt Kint has got.
Maybe that was for Josie and the Pussycats. Right. The team sings.
This book is amazing. I love the art and color and storytelling. Beautiful work. You can put that on the back of any book. He probably gives that quote out to anybody who asks. But it wasn't terrible or anything. It just didn't grab me at all, and I don't remember it.
Is the coloring in that comic the same as the cover? Doing those unnecessary contrasts?
Well, there's a night scene.
I
don't see many. The colors, Yeah, there's not blue and orange. It's not complementary colors everywhere. The color is brighter than the rest of it, I think. But everything, the art was just okay. It's like this, David Mazzucchelli influenced art kind of. There was nothing wrong with it. There was just nothing right with it.
Doesn't anybody balance the colors anymore?
Does anybody remember Laughter? I don't know. How's that popping down there? What song is that from? That's from some song. Word to the wise about reading comics. If you want to remember them, don't smoke a J before you read. Some comics I heard that helps out. I look for stuff, but I'm a maniac. Maniac out on the floor. Oh, and here's a terrifically pretty cover by Terry Moore. But of course, the thing is, she's got a razor blade taped to her thumb.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the similar pose that he has for his Kickstarter, the Terry Moore After Dark? There's a character sitting on a couch very similar to that.
Could be this one, because his After Dark one is a whole bunch of his racier drawings, and this definitely falls into the racier category. There's nudity in the After Dark one too, but it's tasteful Terry Moore nudity. I don't think Terry Moore can be distasteful.
No.
But yeah, Terry Moore. I love all his stuff. His stuff is terrific. He's one of these cartoonists I think is a genius. And then I watch his YouTube channel. He's just such a normal, nice guy. I'm like, where's your beret? Where's your Picasso madness? Or something. It's just such a nice, normal, mild-mannered guy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he gets it all out in his comics.
So this book is set up to basically give you a history of DC.
Let's go solo.
So you get like a history of DC on one side. It talks about like the radio show for Superman. And then it looks like it starts off with the ephemera of like, this is what the ash cans look like. And what the ash cans were, if I remember correctly, were done just so they could get the copyright of the name.
Right.
Sometimes the art on the bottom had nothing to do with the name. And then the reason why it was called ash can is because after they used it for what they needed for, they would toss it into the garbage or the ash can. So
back when they burned garbage.
Yep. So it's pretty much the history of DC. What were they giving out? So this is a Batman mask, a Wonder Woman button, and a secret decoder. Not a ring, but a decoder palette, I guess it would be called.
A proportion wheel.
A proportion wheel. There you go. Here's the back. So they don't give you an actual button. They give you a recreation of what the button would have looked like. I'm going to assume it's the size because this is the size that a lot of the Marvel ones were done. And again, background photos, some more ash cans for Superman. So the original artwork sizes for World's Finest, not the sizes, but the type of artwork that they use.
This book's like amazing. So this is amazing. So do they reprint all the ash cans in and you could slide it out of the sleeve there and all that?
I mean, yes. So I was looking at it before. I thought they were sealed in, but it turns out that you can actually pop them out from the top of them.
This is amazing, though, the amount of production that went into this book. What's the cover price of this book, man? I feel like it'd be $150.
That's because it was being sold in museums as an art object.
Right, and it is. Yeah. It's amazing.
So they reprint the whole thing.
That wasn't going to comic shops.
No, it was not.
You could buy it in any mega store in Europe. I remember seeing the Marvel Vault a lot, and think, man, this is expensive. Why would I buy this?
Yeah.
As it turns out, it's actually some interesting stuff in there.
Yeah. Some cool things.
Well, I got a question for you guys related to this. So, somewhat related to this. So, do you remember? It might have been 5 years ago, right? The original, the Jose Luis Garcia Lopez style guides, the DC style guides from like the very early 80s, might have been late 70s.
Who's younger than I thought he was? I just saw his birthday was recently, and
right.
He was like in his 20s.
Fantastic
in the late
stuff.
70s doing all that stuff.
That style guy, like, a couple of them appeared, maybe one of them on eBay, or everyone went crazy because there were scans that appeared online of like maybe every page. I think it was a 3-ring binder. I'm not sure though.
Right.
And then there was lots of calls like it was.
Yeah, it was a 3-ring binder. It was basically the style guide. I've been trying to get my hands on one of those for years, just to have it historically. And I even thought about seeing if we could contact someone at DC and reprinting it.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at. That's my question. You did that, like, there's a lot of like at least a vocal minority of people saying this should be reprinted, and like I would buy it. Now is there enough of a market to support it? I think so for a short print run. But
completely. And they were selling them as one single sheet.
Right.
Someone took it. And
Jared thinks no, it's not worth doing.
I'm not saying it's not worth doing. I'd get it. I'm saying they won't think it's worth doing.
Right. Because license it out.
When you're the guy who approves things, you want the chance for everything to be a home run.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When you go in knowing it's a single or a double, you're not interested.
Yeah, when you're trying to champion a niche project like that.
Yeah. So you would need somebody to change. Like Chris Geruso always says that there's that one. The reason he hasn't done any work for Marvel in years is there's the one guy at Marvel who approves projects, thinks his stuff doesn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no projects for him, therefore.
Right.
That's how it works. It's that it doesn't matter. Like,
I think I know who that person is, but I'm not sure.
I don't know who that person is. So.
I have a guess who it is, but it could have changed.
But it's like you or I were in charge, and we had the feeling that because we know something, we know that would sell pretty well. No one's losing money on it.
Yeah.
But the person who's approving the projects isn't looking to not lose money.
Right. And then,
which
is why they license out stuff to like an IDW to do an artist edition.
Exactly where I was going to go.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of those IDW books, I pitched those ideas at Marvel. You know, it's like, let's do just because I had the artwork there. Mm-hmm. I could just give me a scanner. I'll scan them in. We could put out a book of just the covers. It's like, that won't sell. We could put out a trade paperback of Spider-Ham. That will never sell. You know, there was, I really was the bane of Ski's existence, because I would show up every day with an idea. And it's like, I would buy that, but they're not going to go for it.
And there's nobody from Marvel or DC going to IDW. Hey, would you guys like to publish? It's probably Scott Dunbier calling them up. Listen, why don't you guys license this to me, and I'll sell 1,000 copies, and I'll give you a $5,000 check.
Right.
Probably something like that.
That's free money to them. They'll take the free money.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of speculation with the events last week that Marvel is going to be doing a whole lot more of that because of just the streamlining of the business. We'll see.
I've been expecting it for years. I mean, one day somebody at Disney was going to figure out the amount of time that it takes to produce something, the amount of money you get from it directly.
Yeah.
It just doesn't jibe with a company like Disney.
Yeah.
They want everything to take 5 minutes to do and sell 5 million of whatever.
Mm-hmm. What? Yeah, have you heard anything, Darren, about Marvel restructuring in Disney?
Only what's
beginning, but I haven't heard anything.
Only the events the last only few days, like just watching some of the YouTube. There's one YouTube. I mean, I watch a lot of comic YouTube channels. So I watch Kayfabe a lot, but they don't cover that kind of stuff. But there's a channel called Comics by Perch, who does. I think he does some. I don't watch him all the time, but I thought he does. Sometimes he does some insightful business stuff.
Right.
Other times it might be a little more. I think it's pretty mild mannered, but it depends. Some people might have some political problems with him. I personally don't.
Yeah.
But he's the one who I'm citing right now who was talking about, like, he thinks it's going to be, this is all what we would think anyway, that they're going to scale back the amount of books they do, which I think is probably true no matter what happened. Mm-hmm. And that they're going to do a whole lot more licensing of projects. Now the question is whether it's, legacy kind of stuff like IDW does, or new material, whether they license that stuff out. I mean, remember, this conversation comes up decade by decade, because remember DC in the early 80s, there was supposedly a very real danger. I don't know how real it was, but this is what you read, that they were going to just license their stuff out to Marvel and let Marvel, because Marvel was killing them at that moment in time. Then you get to the mid-90s Marvel collapse, and everyone was talking about Marvel licensing their stuff out to third parties to do it. But now, now in 2023, with what just happened. So my answer to you is that I haven't read a whole lot about.
I haven't read. It just happened. So
it just happened, and whatever will happen from this probably will take, 1 to 2 years to shake out to know what's the ramification of it.
That's where does anybody remember laughter comes from? Led Zeppelin, Stairway Live. Does anybody remember laughter? There's a lady.
I've been expecting this because the minute Disney bought Marvel, it was not so that they could publish comic books.
No,
we all knew that.
Yeah.
What DC had inside Warner was something that was very lucky for them, that it could not be duplicated. They have been able to hide themselves in Warner's corporate structure and continue doing what they were doing. But Marvel at Disney, they never had that chance.
Yeah,
they never would have. So it was just a matter of time until they stopped publishing comics.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with it. They probably will greatly scale down, at least by a third of what their output is.
Disney has never been interested in comics.
Mm-hmm. The question, remember we keep going back to the 90s, but it's relevant. Like, so when I was Wilson, when we got there, like 93, 94, the height of the output of Marvel UK was the big one I always think about, how much like that's. But the idea I was always told was, listen, we want to choke the other publishers off the racks.
Right.
Like every slot we take is a slot another publisher can't take. And then we saw what happened, but that was industry wide. So the question is, like, if Marvel puts out, I'm making this up, 80 books a month, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say they go down to 60. In aggregate, are they going to sell the same quantity of comics? Because you're not splitting the audience as much, but you're saving money because you're not producing as much. It's like you're selling more of the same comic to more people, but you're still only paying, for one creative team versus producing more stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't think they'll make as much money because what it is quality doesn't scale.
Right.
So that let's just say they're putting out if they have 100 comics they're putting out, 50 of them are going to be no good. 25 of them are going to be pretty good. 15 of them are going to be really good, and 10 of them are going to be excellent. Mm-hmm. Let's say you want to go from 100 to 150. That doesn't scale up. You don't all of a sudden have now, instead of 10 excellent ones, 12 excellent ones. You still have 10 excellent ones.
Right.
Because the other 50 guys you got to find to do those comics aren't going to be as good as your best guys.
Right.
Otherwise, it'll already be there.
What was that?
Otherwise, they'll already be doing the 10 excellent ones.
So the idea is if you're putting out, let's say, 50 books a month.
So if you go from 80 to 60, you're not going to get better quality books.
Right.
You're not going to sell more books. You're just going to lose that 20 books worth selling.
Right. And so the idea, which we think would not be true, is like the bottom of that list of that remaining 60, wherever it is, will they all of a sudden sell more because now there's the ones you got rid of, those dollars will now go to those, but the answer is no. Okay.
I don't think so because when you think about it, you're just pick your average comic fan has those 80 books to choose from. Mm-hmm. He's going to choose the 6 really great ones, 1 or 2 from the, he's going to 1 or 2 from the pretty good ones. As the line goes down, he's going to get your average comic fan is going to get fewer and fewer of the bad books.
Right.
But there's enough comic fans to keep those bad books going for a little while at least.
Ultimately, it's a matter of perception that you have. It's how much you've identified with those characters in the past or with the creator. So it might not be that you go for the quality ones, but if they cancel the crappy ones that you like, that doesn't mean you're going to buy the quality ones.
That's right. It's like,
I'm saying it doesn't mean you're going to buy another crappy one.
Right.
But it also applies to the quality ones.
Yeah, I think you're right too. Probably, if you're not already buying the quality one, them canceling your crappy one won't necessarily mean you buy the quality one.
You're
right.
So maybe 5-10% extra on the quality ones.
Yeah.
But it's mostly a matter of using resources because you do have to use manpower to create those crappy ones as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the revenue that you get from the crappy ones may not be worth it. I mean, it could be the awesome ones get you 100,000 in revenue. The other ones get you 20. Even if you do make a profit, you're still wasting too much time for a little profit.
Yeah, but in that case, what you do, what they usually do, is you cancel that one and start a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, the new one will be better.
Which is also wrong. What they should do is increase marketing spending. But maybe now that they don't have the comic book people, they will let the marketing people from Disney work on it.
The problem is there's no budget to market. Comics are.
No, comics don't have marketing budget.
Right.
Multimedia companies do.
Okay.
So now it's a product inside the multimedia company portfolio.
Okay, so they're going to market it anyway.
Yeah, but right. Yeah, they're going to market, but since we were used to not marketing,
right?
Because we think that marketing is put an ad on previews.
Yeah.
Well, Paulo, you're saying use the marketing muscle of the mothership here to really,
Yeah.
I mean, the big one of this that everyone talks about, which I mean, this is antiquated now, I guess, was G.I. Joe commercials in the early '80s. Everyone was like that was like unheard of. Like
that's because that was a scam.
That was a moment
that was
in
a
time.
loophole in the law of selling to children.
Oh, you mean the actual cartoon series itself?
You were not
the cartoon commercial. The cartoon
you could not have a commercial for the toys in the cartoon series about the toys, but you could have a commercial for the comic book,
right,
featuring the toys.
There were great commercials. Also, that's what at least
they
I
made you buy the comic book and the toy.
They give you a bit of what the story is going on.
Was great.
Read the rest of it in Marvel Comics.
So,
which led you to the toys, which had ads for the toys.
So, I mean, I think we're agreeing here. Like, if you trim where your output is, that doesn't mean that there's going to be more people buying the ones that are selling less that remain because they will just not buy it. That's all. That's, they just have money left over now for something else. But
they'll buy something else.
My early days of retailing, if you even interested, is that when I was late '80s when I was Overstreet, the Guide had a publication. It was almost bi-monthly, like a magazine where you have retailer reports where they had like comic stores like write up a report of what's selling in their store in terms of new books, back issues, blah blah blah. And so I remember one retailer, this is circa '88, saying like the problem with Marvel and DC is the output is getting so great is that our customers just simply can't buy it all. And even at age like 15, me reading this, I was like, they're not supposed to buy it all. It's just to buy what they like. And maybe there have been collectors that just like to buy the entire line of a publisher.
There were. I once heard it described thusly, and I agree with it. Mm-hmm. I forget which point it was. People went from being Marvel comic fans, where you could buy just about every Marvel comic, to being X-Men fans, to being Avengers fans, to being Spider-Man fans. Sometime in the night when all of a sudden every little universe had 5 or 6 books. You couldn't keep up with them all.
Right.
So you kept up with, you were no longer a Marvel fan. And they called that sort of the end of the Marvel shared universe. Was all of a sudden you got an X-Men universe and a Spider-Man universe and everybody was kind of their own thing.
Back in let's take a year, let's take 86 because everyone talks about 86, right?
Right. Dark Knight and Watchmen. That's when I stopped reading Marvel.
I was talking about New Universe, man, but no.
Yeah.
So in 1986, I'm talking direct market buyers in comic book stores.
Right.
What percentage of direct market customers do you think bought X-Men every month in 1986? 80 to 90%? Like what I'm saying is
probably a lot. That was
what I'm saying is almost everyone had on their pull list, don't you think?
Right.
That's
when I stopped having it on my pull.
Right, I know because there's a point where you became real indie, but
you left comics so I could come in and buy those books,
right? And then you get to let's say 90, 91, like the height of the Image guys before they left Marvel. So we're talking Spider-Man, McFarlane, blah blah blah. So how many legit collectors do we think were actually in the marketplace? I've heard the number to be we think there's 300,000 at that moment in time, like actual legit monthly comic buyers. And beyond that, you have speculation.
Here's an interesting thing. I remember this happening in sometime in the mid 90s. Marvel did some sort of marketing survey, which is unheard of that they did some sort of marketing because they just didn't do that sort of thing to find out sort of what the average fan was. And I remember everybody being stunned to find, because we think of the average fan as someone who goes to the comic shop every week or every month because they can't miss that issue of the X-Men. And the average fan bought 8 issues a year. They'd buy some issues and then not buy any issues the rest of the year. And so it was they were stunned to find out the average fan was really a casual fan who only bought, 8 to 10 issues a year.
Right.
And they were just like, what? So I don't know how big that, taking that into account, because I always heard around that same, if the best-selling Marvel comic was X-Men that sold 200,000 copies, everybody always figured there must be 300,000 or 400,000 fans out there.
Right.
But it was actually pretty. If your average fan is only buying 8 issues a year, there had to be a lot more than that. But they were only buying 8 issues a year.
I mean, with floppies now,
stuff they bought.
Well, we've been having this conversation about periodical floppies for like decades, for at least 20 years now, where it's like the publishers are trying to sell more and more to a shrinking, aging audience. So you try to make up that ground by trying to sell more expensive stuff, more stuff to that audience who's still willing to
selling a $4 comic to 50,000 people is just the same as selling a $1 comic to 200,000.
Yeah, if you take out if you break down the costs, the fixed cost versus the variable cost of it.
In newsstand distribution, selling a $1 comic to 200,000 people is 200,000 pairs of eyes, which for advertisers is more interesting.
Right. Yeah.
But nobody cares about advertising space in modern comics anymore.
That's right. Yeah. It probably went away after the mid-90s. I don't know. Probably a little farther than that. But we all remember these classic, like the Saturday morning cartoon ads and stuff like that.
Right.
But, ads for like High C and Gator, Kool-Aid and
Spalding.
Yeah. I mean, I have a book on my shelf.
Dr. J.
Yeah, I have a book on my shelf of toy ads. I can show it to you, Jared. Toy ads from like over 100 years.
Yes.
And some of that stuff is just scans right out of Marvel Comics from like the 70s and 80s. You know, just like Masters of the Universe or whatever else was going on at the time.
There's a book on the ads from the comics that explains where they get. Like I remember reading about Count Dante in that book. I don't know. Bunch had it like 15 years ago.
No, I was surprised to find out that grit actually existed. Every time I saw that ad, I thought it was a scam.
I saw it as I couldn't believe it either. I saw it like in a back issue as a kid. I'm like, what you're saying? Like some people would sell this publication door to door.
I think Mort Todd was the only one I ever knew who said they sold grit. Well, what it was you would buy like 50 issues of grit and they'd send them to you, and then it was up to you to sell them door to door. So, and I think you paid for them up front too.
You know what? I need to go on eBay and see if I could pick up a copy of an issue. I'm curious to know what the content.
You can. I remember looking a while ago, and there was there.
Yeah, it sucks.
So people don't burn.
It makes Reader's Digest look smart.
Right.
Yeah, people were in my county. You were never allowed to burn garbage. It's kind of as the wherever it's crowded in the U.S., you're not allowed to burn garbage. I think where it's uncrowded, you can still burn garbage. Hippo murder comics. Another comic I got this week, Local Man. This one's been good. With the back is like a 6-page 90s superhero one.
Yeah. It looks just like Brigade. I think that's what it's supposed to look like.
Right. Because this guy right here, Crossjack.
Right. Yeah, great.
With this matter of fact, there's a Starhawk. No, what's his name? Nighthawk.
Oh yeah.
Shadowhawk.
Shadowhawk.
Crossjack got kicked out of this superhero team named Third Gen, and now had to go back to his hometown where he's disgraced. And his whole hometown hates him, and he's not allowed to be a superhero because of copyright reasons. But what's funny is we finally found out.
That's a fun concept. I could see that being.
It is. It's really well
TV
done.
Series or something.
Was it written by Tony Fleeks and Tim Seeley, Farmington Arts by Tony Fleeks and Tim Seeley. I didn't know Tim Seeley was an artist. He draws the 90s 6-pager in the back. But this is what's the thing? There's this like the leader of the leader of Third Gen is like this Christian hero named Crusade, who's supposedly really violent and bad on the inside, but it turns out that Crossjack was having an affair with the Crusade's wife for years, so that's why he got kicked. That's why he got disgraced and kicked out of the team. We found out this issue. Now a murder, and he's not allowed to investigate any murders either, but he's going to do it anyway because his old villain who came from his hometown too. Because it turns out, what's this guy's name? He Crossjack is kind of like Taskmaster in that he's really good with weapons. And what's this guy's name? Wardhog? No, something Hog. What was like his hometown, and he comes from like a small town in the U.S. And Hodag, that's the guy's name, was dressed up like this hog outfit named Hodag. He's some kind of monster. And he was his hometown villain kind of thing. And then when Crossjack went up to 3rd Gen, Hodag kind of joined this villain team to fight him. And Hodag was really this goofy guy who kind of, he just kind of wanted to be a superhero villain and get into fights. He wasn't really evil or anything. But then the Crusader guy hit Hodag so hard he gave him brain damage and had to, and he's talking to Hodag's mother who hates Crusader. So she was thanking Crossjack for sleeping with his wife. That was a funny scene, but really nice stuff. This one I put on my pull list after the first issue, so I really enjoyed it. And I even enjoy the 90s flashback stories that are just so 90s.
Jared, when you were in I guess mid 80s when you started just reading independent stuff, is that when the start
I was
around
reading independent stuff as soon as I get in the late 70s. I just completely abandoned Marvel and DC by the mid 80s.
Right. So when you get to that point, when you get to that point, let's say, in that mid 80s black and white boom era, is it like really like Eternity, Eclipse, Kamiko? Is that really like can you think of the stuff
First
that were really...
comics? Yeah, First Comics, Kamiko, all that stuff. And the Eclipse, that was another big one, right?
Yeah, Eternity.
Those are the 3 biggest ones. Eternity wasn't around. I didn't buy much from Eternity. I barely remember that. They put out like 3rd-rate superhero stuff, as far as
I remember. Eclipse had that.
Eclipse had a lot of good stuff.
Eclipse had that
Pacific comic.
Pacific, yeah. Eclipse covers. Remember they have that border. Remember Eclipse had that border they did for like a couple of years, like around all their comics. Like they would do like the covers.
That border.
It had. It was just a stylistic, kind of maybe they wanted to give their comic a certain look, like that's an Eclipse book, but it had like a border around the cover art. At least the ones I got from there. I might not have lasted that long, that kind of stylistic.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember a border around Eclipse.
I mean, some of the comics, like, I got this way after the fact. Winter World, remember that?
Oh yeah, Winter World was good.
Yeah,
that was Jorge Zafino.
Yeah.
Chuck Dixon, I think, wrote it.
Yeah,
they finished up that series in the 90s. They put out another mini before Jorge Zafino died.
And then in the last decade or so, they put out, I don't know if it was a reprint, but I know I have some, maybe it was from IDW, but it was some kind of continuation of the story, or maybe it was just a reprint or something, but it was kind of a cool...
They put out a reprint and a continuation.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah. There was new Winter World stuff and a reprint. I think his son may have drawn that. I can't remember. When did Jorge Zafino die? I can't remember if he did it or his son may have done it.
I think he might have died in the 80s, believe it or not. I think he...
No, he was around in the 90s, Jorge Zafino.
Oh, okay.
He was doing stuff for Marvel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember because he was like one of these office favorite artists. Whenever his pages would come in, we'd all ooh and ah over them.
When I used to see properties bounce around in different publishers when I was first started collecting as a teenager, I didn't really understand it. I just thought like wherever it was would be parked forever. And like, I just didn't know, like, just like when DC had in the mid 80s had the Star Trek license. At that point in time, I had no idea Marvel had the Star Trek license like in the 70s.
Yeah.
And so when I saw stuff like the Rocketeer bounce around with like 5 different publishers, whatever it was, or or even Dreadstar maybe was at a couple different publishers. And
well, being an indie guy in the early 80s, late 70s, I knew all, I was hip to all that stuff because that's why they were going to indie stuff, because they owned it. So that was
how did you know about that stuff back then? Was it from just going to the comic store? Was it reading Comic Buyer's Guide, or like how?
I often wonder that. I look back and go, first of all, the comic store opened the summer I turned 15 in 1981. So I definitely, was pretty young when a comic store opened, but I would read anything I could find on comics. So once the comic store opened, I could buy Amazing Heroes or whatever I get my hands on. But I'm like, how did I find out this stuff? I'm always trying to remember, but there's also stuff like that, that program to the Comic-Con that Wilson and I both have. There's a lot of history stuff in there. That you can learn. Like I got that when I was like 10, that had the history of Conan comics and the history of that. So there was a lot of stuff. I would read all that stuff I could get. But the current stuff, I was like,
what convention was that? Now I'm interested to hear it.
1976. What that program was from, Wilson?
1976. I don't remember
you guys went to that show?
Right?
Did you go to that show? Okay,
I happened to back when I was a kid. There was a kid network of you'd hear somebody in the in 2 streets over was selling some comics, and so you'd go over, you'd knock on his door. He says, "Billy here? We hear he's selling comics." And his sister would go, "Billy, some kids are here to buy your comics." And you'd go into his house and he'd sell you some comics. And one time I was buying some comics and it had Stan Lee's autograph on it too. It was a program from a Comic-Con that was reading. He's like, "Here, take this. You want this? I'm throwing it in." I was like, "Okay, I'll take it." And I've had it ever since. But there we go. Mine doesn't.
So Jared had done a
I did a video on it.
Or YouTube video.
I did a video on it, showing it off.
So his never had a cover, and it turned out that I happened to have that same book.
Right.
So it was a Marvel comic convention at the Hotel Commodore. I had bought this on eBay probably 2 years into me working at Marvel, because it had so you have Stan Lee's signature.
That's right where I have Stan Lee's signature too.
And basically I had bought it mainly because of there's a portion here with the Marvel bullpen at the time.
Right.
So I would take this with me to conventions and get the Marvel bullpenners who were still alive at that time period to sign for me. So some of these people still at Marvel, or they would visit Marvel. So I would have the book there and have them signing it. And then if they didn't have a photo in it, but if they worked for Marvel as a freelancer at the time, I got them to sign in. Then eventually I just got anyone who was at Marvel during the time I worked there to sign it.
Cool. Oh, there's
and I just signed it just so if it ever leaves my hand, I'm still part of the Marvel universe that way.
There's also articles in there. That's what we were talking about. I remember there's one on the history of Conan published and stuff like that. Like you could learn about, there's something about Golden Age Marvel in there too, wasn't there?
I think so.
So I would read anything like that I could get my hands on. The Steranko
like
history
of Marvel.
Yeah. And there's even some current event stuff in there, some comics that'll be coming out, and it's like whatever was coming out soon from Marvel. So anything like that I could get my hands on, I'd read. But there wasn't a lot in the news about comics, so
Right, so it was like you either get this or whatever magazines were coming out at the time. So Comic Illustrated, Comic Scene.
I used to have a subscription to Dynamite magazine that occasionally had comic stuff in it.
Then there was a couple of periodicals that were like kind of similar to Comics Buyer's Guide.
Buyer's Guide I never saw.
There was
Comics Reader was the name of Comics Reader was the name of another one from my early days of the comic shop.
And Comics Interview.
Yeah.
was one that I really like getting. That I still every once in a while, if I see it, I'll pick up a comics interview. I bought one recently, and by recently, like last 2 years, one that they had about Secret Wars, just to see like artwork that never appeared in the books. It would just be whatever they were working on at the time. And I think that's the first time I got to see like the Marvel versus DC stuff that George Perez was supposed to do in the 80s. I remember my local comic book shop had Xerox copies of like the covers. So that got, that book got as far as a lot of it was drawn, and even cover art was just showing up in comic book shops before anything official came out. And they never did those issues, until they eventually did the Marvel versus DC stuff, and they were able to pull out some artwork to add to it.
Man, that JLA Avengers sat on my shelf for a decade before I finally got around to reading it.
Oh yeah.
And it turns out I really, really like that book. I especially like to kind of just look through it like they were all Sunday strips. Because George Perez does so much design and drawing on those 2 pages that it's like looking at a Sunday strip. And it's like, I don't even have to read it. I just have to kind of open it up and read a couple of pages here, flip it, look at it, read a couple of pages here. Because the story is kind of almost incidental to me. But it really is some amazing design and drawing by George Perez.
When was that finally printed? In the mid to late 90s?
No, 2004, 2005. I was still in Marvel. When it was
even that. Like I remember copies of it sitting around when I got back to Marvel in 2004. And for some reason, I had thought it had come out years earlier. Because there was a long gap there when I didn't look at comics. Yeah.
You also had the Amalgam Universe stuff coming out around the same time too, so that all kind of blends in together. What was Marvel versus DC, then Amalgam or something like that.
Yeah,
and it did sell really well. We actually had a discussion once with Tim on this channel because Tim remembered the JLA Avengers as a big event happening, and I was like, "Did it really?" I don't remember it being much of an event. I remember it kind of being most people I knew or so whatever. I remember it not making a huge ripple. But we went back and looked at the sales, and it was in fact one of the top-selling books.
I do remember articles about it. Yeah. I do remember articles about it. So I do remember it being kind of loud, but again,
I remember it as being like us old guys were interested in it.
Yeah. My LCS owner, he complained that the book should have come out 2 years earlier when Heroes Return was still a thing. Because by the time it came out, it would have sold a lot more if it had been made by Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley.
But it really was a good seller when we went back and looked at the sales. It was in the top 5 every issue it came out. So. But like I said, I don't remember it making a big splash. So, but I think it's just a book everybody bought. But since it didn't affect continuity or anything, then remember just before George Perez died, the Tempest in a Teapot with Marvel and DC printing a limited run of those, and everybody got pissed off because they couldn't get one. Which I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Well, that was annoying. It's like, oh, we're going back to press with this. Only 10,000 copies. George Perez is dying. You're making a big deal of this. There's all sorts of publicity, and you're only printing 10,000 copies. And everybody's like, that's all the press time we could get. Well, I think they could have got some more press time since then, but I'm guessing they didn't get that. And I don't think Marvel or DC, the big wigs cared at all either to do it.
Right.
So it was like Marie Javins and
I think they probably wanted to make sure it sold out too.
Got it done. What was that?
I think they probably wanted to ensure it sold out too, because if you printed too much and it was just kind of embarrassing.
I don't think people above like the editor-in-chief level even cared about the book. I think that was it, from what I could tell. Like all the people who actually knew and worked with George Perez cared, but the guy who was in charge of approving projects didn't care.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started
the last comic I got this week is The Approach #5, last issue of the series. It was the Thing movie. I like Jeremy Juan's writing generally, but the art got worse and worse over the 5 issues. It did not end well. The art was just, I don't know. I don't remember the art in the first 2 issues being this indistinct. So it started well. It didn't end well, unfortunately. I'm going to go back and look at the art in the beginning because I was just reading this going, it's so mediocre. Why am I buying this?
Did the art started strong or stronger?
I don't remember it being that as weak as it is in this last issue.
Maybe their heart wasn't in it to the end, or it was a deadline thing or something.
Who knows? I mean, I'm gonna have to go back and look. Just because mine was my perception, but the art and storytelling just wasn't up to snuff for me in this. It was just like let me see if I can give you an example. Like here, like what is happening on this page? He's ramming a truck into the giant monster, which is this sort of amorphous form. And then there's this. That is not much of an explosion. It's just mediocre. It's funny. This reminds me of there was an issue of Ragnarok where I remember telling Walter on Facebook, I was like, wow, that you may have drawn one of my favorite explosions I've ever seen. It really was a good explosion with all that Walter Simonson, graphic design in it. This explosion's got like nothing in it. It's just like an amorphous. It doesn't feel. It hits you with nothing. Even that boom or that doom, pardon me, is just. I don't know. The story lost me.
Mm.
And the story was there's a blizzard at an airport. Bunch of people snowed into the blizzard. Monster shows up. And they killed the monster at the end. But did they? Dun, dun, dun. It was, that theme ended.
That's the kind of thing that I know that none of us live in a vacuum and the ideas, blah, 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 people talk about, that stuff. But, when you say, okay, we're going to do a monster in the snow, that's like kind of like a blobby, shape-shifting looking monster, whatever it is. Like this, hasn't this been done before? I mean, there's just, now you can say everything has been done, but what I'm saying is it may hits a little too close to home. I don't know what the monster looks like. Is it too similar?
The monster looks terrible. The monster looks. Let me see.
I didn't mean for you to debag your comic again, just to.
There's the monster. Some Cthulhu-like monster with multiple mouths.
It looks like the mouth for the Stranger Things.
Yeah. I mean, it's not particularly interesting looking monster. Most of it is shaped. Most of the time, it's kind of shapeless. Then all of a sudden, it's got limbs. It's not. There's not a lot of good monster design in it. It's just okay.
The first time I saw a monster drawn that in a comic that I was like, I can't believe what I'm looking at, was actually it was the cover for Hooky, the Spider-Man graphic novel, the Bernie writes in. With all the mouths and all the I don't know if that point in my life I probably had seen the Thing. I think I did see a thing when I saw it, but what I'm saying is I'd never seen a drawing like that before. I don't think I did. That was the amount of detail of just monster mouths and eyes and veins and all that stuff. I thought it was amazing.
Well, it's time to wind up.
Okay.
Time to wind up. Paulo can get to bed. Anybody have any last thought? Because I don't.
Thank you for having me. And one thing I was going to post on Facebook, I didn't do it, was I guess Ike doesn't get comps anymore. He's off the comp list.
No comp for Ike.
Yeah.
No comps for Ike.
Right.
Yeah.
I posted that I hope they fired him at lunchtime and escorted him out, since that was his move. All right. So everybody have a good week out there. We will catch
Take
y'all
care.
later.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye, Ike.